Hey guys, tonight we slip into the shadowy jungles of the Yucatan, where the air presses heavy against your skin, and every rustle in the canopy sounds like a whispered secret. The world of the ancient Maya is thick with vines, temples, and moonlit plazas, and beneath that beauty lies rituals so strange, you'll wonder how anyone survived them. You're about to wade into ceremonies where blood, sex, and cosmic duty all weave together in ways both fascinating and horrifying. And honestly, you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop your location and your local time in the comments. It always amazes me how this little bedtime journey can stretch across the whole world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey. Together the forest presses close around you. Cicadas chant in relentless waves, and fireflies blink faintly over roots that twist like serpents. You step carefully, brushing aside giant ferns slick with dew, and the path opens to a clearing where a massive stone pyramid looms. At its summit burns a torch, one single flame holding back the darkness. The scent of copal resin hangs thick, its smoke drifting like pale ribbons. Every breath you take tastes faintly of pine and something sharper, almost metallic. You realize you're not alone. Villagers gather at the base of the temple, their skin painted in chalky white, some with crimson streaks trailing down their arms and legs. They murmur prayers, and the language rolls like a drumbeat in your ears. The sound feels older than the earth beneath your feet. You probably expect a sleepy myth-telling tonight, but the Maya didn't do sleepy. To them, the universe was a constant negotiation with gods, who demanded attention through corn, through sweat, and often, through sex and blood. You can almost feel the urgency pressing on you. Stars above aren't twinkling decorations. They're the burning eyes of deities, watching to see if humans uphold their end of the cosmic bargain. One fact you'll want to hold on to. The Maya saw human life as fuel for the cosmos. Just as corn nourished people, people nourished the gods. This included sexuality, fertility, and reproduction. A child wasn't just born, it was a cosmic offering, proof that the world was still fertile and balanced. But the forest tells a darker tale. You hear a conch shell blast, low and trembling, and a line of dancers steps forward. Their headdresses are heavy with quetzal feathers, shimmering green in the torchlight. They move in circles, stamping the earth in time with drums that pound like a heartbeat. Each step seems meant to keep the universe turning. A priest appears, his body smeared with black ash, his mouth red as if freshly fed. He lifts a bundle of thorned cords high into the air. Your stomach knots at the sight. You don't yet know what they'll do with them, but the weight of dread hangs in the clearing. You remember your modern sunscreen and bug spray and suddenly feel absurdly out of place. Historians actually tell us the Maya sometimes used a mixture of ground maize and crocodile dung as a crude sunblock. Not something you'd find at your local pharmacy. The priest begins to chant, and the villagers fall silent. Even the cicadas hush, as though the jungle itself knows when to hold its breath. You lean in, hearing phrases about the maize gods, sacrifice, and the serpent of the underworld. The air thickens, the stars overhead seem brighter, and you realize you are standing inside a worldview where sex, suffering, and crops are all bound together in one cosmic recipe. Here's the quirky tidbit for you. Some Maya rituals were scheduled to align with Venus's position in the sky. Yes, the morning star wasn't just a pretty celestial body, it was a timer for warfare, fertility rites, and even marriage decisions. Historians still argue whether this obsession with Venus was purely astronomical or deeply erotic in symbolism, but either way, when that planet glowed on the horizon, lives were changed. You shuffle back as the crowd parts, and a young woman steps forward. She's draped in jade beads that rattle as she walks, her hair braided with ribbons. Her face is painted a solemn blue, the color of sacrifice. She doesn't tremble. She doesn't even blink. It strikes you that she has rehearsed this moment her entire life. Trained to see her body as a gift to beings she never touched but who supposedly rule the rains, the cornfields, and even death itself. The torchlight flickers, throwing long shadows up the temple wall. Your eyes catch on carvings etched centuries earlier, scenes of men piercing themselves with obsidian blades, of women offering bowls of blood, of gods feasting in unnatural intimacy with mortals. The imagery is both mesmerizing and disturbing. A gallery of devotion carved into stone. You pause, realizing that you're hearing history not from textbooks, but from the ground itself, from smoke, sound, and trembling bodies in ritual motion. The people around you aren't monsters. They're desperate negotiators, doing whatever it takes to keep their fragile universe alive. And yet, as you breathe the resin and sweat, you can't shake the cold thought. What does it cost to live in a world where intimacy is currency and suffering is proof of loyalty? The drums grow louder. You can feel them in your chest, thumping, like your own heart. The air smells of sweat and resin, and every face is turned skyward. The flame atop the temple suddenly flares brighter, as though the gods have leaned closer. You wonder if you're ready to see what comes next, or if, like the villagers, you'll simply accept that horror can be holy when framed by stone and fire. Dawn leans pale against the thatch when you step into the royal compound, where patios unfold like nested courtyards, and doorways blink with woven curtains. Incense hangs low, a sleepy ribbon above hammocks and painted benches. The hush is different. Hairless jungle, more etiquette like the air itself has learned to tiptoe. You follow a steward past jars of lime for maize, baskets of cotton thread, and a wall where jade earspools glimmer like small moons. This is where the marriage mathematics turns complicated. The polygamy puzzle. You catch the rhythm first, footsteps that know which doorway to cross, and which to avoid, then the layout. Each woman's space is distinct, a little world with its own hearthstones, loom, and painted water jar. The steward doesn't say harem, and you stop yourself before you do. You're in a Maya court, not a storybook palace. Still, the effect is undeniable. One lord, several wives, and a schedule careful enough to make your modern calendar app weep. Mainstream fact for your pocket. Among the Maya, polygyny was primarily an elite strategy. Commoners tended toward monogamy, but rulers and high nobles could take multiple wives to cement alliances, expand labor pools, and secure heirs. Colonial observers like Diego de Landa wrote of lords maintaining several spouses, while marriages forged with distant towns stitched political maps tighter than any treaty. You can read the policy in the architecture rooms that partition status, courtyards that choreograph visits, storage pits that measure abundance. The principal wife steps from a doorway, her hoop hill embroidered with a border of stepped fret motifs, the same pattern you saw carved into stairways last night. She moves with the steady gravity of a hearth, quiet, central, slightly dangerous if you mishandle the fire. Behind her, younger wives laugh over a tangly skein of cotton. The principal wife does not turn. She doesn't need to. Authority flows around her like warm air. In this house, rank is a temperature you feel on your skin. A cup of cacao arrives with foam whisked high, and you sip carefully while a scribe unrolls a strip of bark paper. The daykeeper's almanacs you saw in the courtyard return as logistics here. Market days, ritual days, visiting days. Your first light joke sneaks out before you can stop it. This looks like an ancient HR schedule, except the dress code requires more jade and fewer spreadsheets. The scribe pretends not to smile, but the ink in his brush lingers a second longer than necessary. A young wife appears with a basket of green chiles and squash blossoms, the scent bright and peppery. She offers them to the principal wife first, a small choreography that says everything about survival in a shared orbit. Cooperation is not idealism, it's insurance. A household like this feeds warriors, scribes, midwives, and messengers. It dresses a court in cotton and feathers. It hosts the alliances that keep tribute flowing and enemies balanced. Your eyes drift 2 racks of cloth mantles in progress. Warp threads taut as harp strings, and you realize textiles here are a ledger as well as an art. Quirky tidbit time. Some courts nicknamed co-wives by the rooms they ruled. House of the West, hearth, house by the painted gourd, a domestic geography that doubled as etiquette. Gifts and messages travel by those nicknames, like addresses wrapped in poetry. You can imagine a messenger asking, very politely, whether the house of the cool shade would accept a basket of cacao this afternoon. The principal wife hears the phrase, and, without looking up, nods approval as if she holds a map only she can read. A boy trots past carrying obsidian flakes, followed by a girl balancing a pot with the serene focus of someone who's done it 1,000 times. Every motion hums with practiced ease. You remember the 3 hearthstones in the marriage courtyard, and feel the echo here. Each woman's fire, a star. Each room, a small constellation. Venus still waits in the morning glaze above the east. The schedule will respect her too. Historians still argue whether celestial timing governed household intimacy as strictly as public ritual. But the alignment of visits with auspicious nights would not surprise anyone with a hand in this ledger. The Lord arrives with 2 attendants, not grandly, but with the weariness of a man whose to-do list includes appease deities. Keep food moving, don't start a family civil war. He offers a brief word at each doorway, a nod here, a joke there. Your second joke bubbles up. Imagine explaining at breakfast that you're double booked between a diplomatic feast and a loom room inventory, and even the principal wife's mouth flickers at the corners. Humor, it turns out, is also a household supply. Beneath the courtesies, stress ripples. Status isn't just felt, it must be fed. The principal wife's siblings may control fields or cacao groves promised as part of her marriage, making her position a pipeline. A younger wife might arrive from a rival town, bringing a truce with her smile. Another may be here because she is astonishingly skilled at weaving ceremonial sashes cloth so potent it can escort a king into the underworld. Power in this place is never singular. It braids skills, kin, and fertility into a rope that must be retied every dawn. You ask, softly, how jealousy is kept from boiling over. The scribe's brush pauses. He points first to the storeroom, then to the lintel, where day signs are chalked, then to the hearth. Food, time, fire, the 3 levers. Rotate resources fairly. Schedule nights by omen. Keep the flames constant. When the fire is steady, he murmurs, tongues cool. The wisdom lands with the gentle weight of a tortilla pressed into your hand. But not everything lands so neatly. Divorce existed here, though not lightly. Infractions, cruelty, neglect could unravel a union. Earlier, you saw how betrayal carved punishments into stone. Here, consequences move through textiles and visits. A woman might return to her kin. A man might forfeit bride wealth. Historians still argue whether colonial accounts overdramatized such breakups, or whether we moderns underplay the risks in a house where politics sleeps in a hammock. You tuck the doubt away, the way a weaver hides a knot in the pattern. A runner arrives, breath quick, with news of a delegation from the west. The principal wife tilts her head. Immediately, a younger wife begins rolling mantles. Another grinds cacao. A third checks the storeroom for salt cakes. This is the part people forget when they imagine harems, the sheer administrative velocity. Looms sing, grinders thrum, a secretary mutters through inventories. And you want to quip that you've never seen logistics this graceful outside a beehive. That's joke number 3. And a grandmother near the doorway lets out the kind of laugh that says she has run this hive since before you had knee joints. You step back to the patio edge and feel the day warming your shoulders. Somewhere beyond these walls, A conch shell cries. Somewhere deeper in the compound, a baby wails and is gathered up, soothed by a lullaby older than the lintel glyphs. You think of the sonnate's black mirror, the thorned chords, the calendar, not saying now this woven math of people. None of it is random. All of it is risk management, in a world where rain can forget your name for a season. You linger on one last image, the principal wife at her loom, beating a line of weft into place so cleanly the pattern sharpens. Beside her, a younger wife knots, fringe while another stirs cacao, foam rising like a small storm in a cup. A trio, not rivals, but not sisters either, holding a household's future between thread, fire, and calendar. The steward clears his throat, the Lord must move on, the schedule must breathe. You nod and follow the corridor of shade back toward the wider court. As you step out, a breeze lifts the curtains. For a heartbeat, you smell copal and cacao intertwined, blood smoke's domesticated cousin. You think, Riley, that crocodile dung sunscreen would at least keep the mosquitoes from attending tonight's logistics meeting. The curtain falls. The house exhales. Somewhere above the trees, Venus pales into day, and the ledger of visits rolls forward by one more quiet line. Morning light filters through lattice stone, warm and gold, and the courtyard feels subdued after the intoxicated whirl of last night. The villagers stir slowly, faces puffy from honey drink, hammocks swaying like lazy metronomes. But beneath the softness lies a tension that cuts sharper than obsidian. Today, your steps take you to a wall where laws are written not in ink, but in pain, adultery punishments carved in stone. You pass through a narrow street, walls high and painted with faded reds, until you reach a plaza where upright stelae stand like solemn sentinels. Their surfaces are covered in glyphs and scenes, some nearly worn smooth, others as crisp as if chiseled yesterday. One depicts two figures bound together, arms twisted, eyes downcast. Another shows a lord holding a torch beside a kneeling couple. You realize these are not abstract tales, they're warnings. Public as any billboard. Mainstream historical fact here. Maya legal codes, though fragmentary, show that adultery was considered a serious breach, particularly for women and nobles. Punishments could range from public shaming to the loss of property, even death in severe cases. Spanish chroniclers noted that stoning or humiliation rituals were practiced, though the accuracy of those accounts remains debated. What's certain is that fidelity was not just a private matter, but a public currency. Betrayal could shake households, alliances, and cosmic harmony. You hear whispers near the stele. A man gestures with his chin at a carving of a bound couple, then lowers his voice. Better the lash than drought. The phrase curls around your ears. In a society where every union was meant to serve balance, infidelity wasn't only a personal slight, it was believed to risk divine displeasure, even famine. You feel a chill as you recall the Senate's dark mirror. The gods didn't miss details. A priest steps forward with a long staff, its head carved into a serpent. He recounts the story of a noblewoman who betrayed her husband with a rival warrior. According to him, the punishment was swift, her family stripped of wealth, her name carved into a stela for all to see. He taps the glyphs, the sound hollow against stone. You realize this is less sermon than deterrent. Quirky tidbit, in some accounts, caught adulterers were forced to parade through the streets with their clothes turned inside out, an early walk of shame, if you will. Imagine your laundry mishap being ritualized as a cosmic warning. You almost chuckle first joke, but then you notice how grim the villagers' faces are. For them, embarrassment wasn't just social, it was metaphysical. If one person's indiscretion could anger the gods, everyone had reason to frown. The priest shifts, pointing to a carving where a man is depicted with a burden on his back. He explains that sometimes, instead of execution, punishment meant labor hauling wood, grinding maize, weaving until debts of shame were balanced. Your modern self wants to call this community service, but with much higher stakes. Second joke sneaks out in your head. Ancient Maya, probation office apply here. Obsidian ankle monitors, optional. But your humor falters when you glance at a nearby stela showing flames curling around a bound figure. The priest lowers his voice, saying such measures were rare, but not unheard of. A final severing of cosmic imbalance through fire. Historians still argue whether these depictions represent literal executions or symbolic narratives, morality tales carved into public stone. Either way, the imagery was meant to burn memory into anyone tempted by betrayal. The plaza grows quiet as an elder woman steps forward, her shawl pulled close. She tells a different story of a man forgiven after confession to a priest and offerings at the temple. She insists mercy was possible, that not all punishments ended in ruin. You catch murmurs in the crowd, some agree, others shake their heads. Here's your open debate. Historians still argue whether Maya justice leaned more toward rigid punishment or flexible restitution. With fragmentary records, it's hard to know. But clearly, even within the community, the tension between retribution and mercy flickered like torchlight. The steely shimmer faintly in the morning sun, their carvings catching golden light. You notice details. The folds of a hoopil, the grim line of a prisoner's mouth, the stoic stance of judges with feathered staffs. It dawns on you that these stones aren't only warnings, they're theater, permanent as the sky. Each passerby rehearses their own fidelity, simply by looking. Children run by, playing with a ball, and one trips near the carvings. His mother snaps sharply, careful. He laughs, unaware, but her eyes dart nervously to the glyphs, as though the gods are already watching. You realize how much daily life is braided with surveillance, not by guards, but by belief itself. You remember the tangled polygamy households, the marriages by omen, the thorned cords of devotion. Desire was never free-floating here. It was tethered to community, law, and cosmos. Adultery, then, wasn't merely breaking trust. It was slicing through the very knot of the universe. A breeze passes, cool and sharp, rustling the feathers on the priest's staff. He dismisses the gathering, and villagers shuffle away, muttering prayers. The stelae remain, implacable, their shadows stretching long across the plaza. You linger, feeling the carvings watching you as much as you watch them. You mutter your third joke, under your breath. Note to self. Delete. Tinder before time traveling to the Maya world. But it lands heavy in your chest. Because beneath the humor is a truth you can't laugh away. Here, the line between intimacy and survival was razor thin, carved in stone for everyone to see. The torches thin out as the procession dissolves into side paths, and you follow a quieter stream of villagers into a courtyard where a clay griddle hisses and the smell of fresh tortillas floats like a soft blanket. The drums are distant now, replaced by the steady rhythm of a metate stone as a girl grinds maize. You scrape a little cinnity chill from your shoulders and step beneath a thatched eave. Here, horror loosens its grip, replaced by something more domestic and no less binding. Tonight, pivots from blood to bargains, marriage arranged by omens. An elder daykeeper sits cross-legged near the hearth, a worn bundle of bark paper almanacs resting in his lap, fingers stained with incense smoke. He doesn't look at the couple, he looks at the sky, then back at a calendar wheel scratched into a wooden board. He whispers day names, soft syllables that sound like rain on leaves, and nods when he reaches one that suits the union. The 260-day count, the sacred Dazokan, decides more than holidays. It decides lives. Your pulse steadies with the warmth of the fire as you watch him mark the auspicious day when these two will share a roof, a table, and the dizzying responsibility of keeping the cosmos in balance by keeping each other fed. That's the mainstream fact for your mental backpack. Among Maya communities, marriages were commonly arranged by families and sealed on lucky dates chosen by diviners using the parents negotiated through a matchmaker, think expert aunt, but with better astrology and exchanged bride wealth gifts like cotton mantles, cacao beans, salt obsidian blades, and the occasional very important turkey. Meanwhile, residence was often patriarchal. The bride moved to the groom's household, folding her life into his family's hearth. A woman with silver hair slides 3 stones closer together beneath the griddle, resetting the household fire so the newcomers will inherit a steady flame. You remember the sacred smoke from the thorned cord ordeal, and realize the same logic breathes here too. Fire is breath, breath is life, and life is the quiet engine of cosmic duty. In Maya thought, the 3 hearthstones echo 3 stars. Geometry tucked into a kitchen corner. The daykeeper nods at the new arrangement as if the heavens just approved the room decor. The matchmaker steps in bracelets chiming, voice velvet but firm reviewing what's owed and what's promised. The groom's father clears his throat and presents folded mantles, the weave tight as river reeds. The bride's mother sets out a basket of cacao beans, their bitter fragrance rising like a serious kind of sweetness. You can't help a small smile. It's the ancient world's wedding registry. 100 beans, 2 blankets, 1 future without drought. Please. And yes, they expect you to bring a gift. If you show up with only good vibes, the daykeeper might schedule you on a very unlucky Tuesday. Quirky tidbit time. In some communities, the couple received symbolic tools, spindle and loom implements for the bride, a cutting blade, or digging stick for the groom, public props for private vows. It's not tuxes and bouquets. It's you weave, I till, and together we stitch the dais. The items are less about gender stereotypes than about cosmic choreography. Cloth and corn, thread and soil, to crafts that keep the calendar well oiled. A screech owl calls from the dark, and a hush moves through the yard. An ant mutters that the omen is fussy but manageable. The daykeeper relights a twist of copal and lets the smoke coil into the gloom. He flicks ash with a practiced gesture that says, in polite priestly language, "Not tonight, bird." Historians still argue whether such night omens could actually postpone a ceremony or simply require extra propitiation, but everyone here treats the moment seriously, like pausing a playlist to let a buffering icon finish thinking. The groom arrives lead by his uncles, not swaggering so much as trying not to trip over the woven mat. He's painted lightly with chalk, a calm face on a nervous spine. The bride enters from behind a reed screen, hair braided and threaded with soft cotton. No kissing, no dramatic flourishes, just the families acknowledging that private affection must learn to speak in public ritual. Your modern brain wants a rom-com, meet cute. The Maya version is more spreadsheet than screenplay. To them, love is a garden you weed for decades, not fireworks that vanish by dawn. And yes, you still owe the turkey. The negotiations drift to the edges you don't see on pottery scenes. Will there be a short period of bride service weeks or months when the groom works in the bride's father's milpa to prove his stamina and patience? Some communities require it, others skip it. Labor can be a more honest dowry than beans. You picture the groom hauling firewood, tending beans, learning the topography of another household's expectations. Not exactly a honeymoon, but probably better for marital durability than a 3-day beach trip in a souvenir clay Jaguar. On the mat between them, a woven cloth lies flat, corners weighted with gourds. The matchmaker ties a thin cord around the couple's wrists gently, deliberately, then knots the corners of the bride's hoop hill to the groom's cloak. The phrase tying the knot suddenly feels very literal. The courtyard exhales together. A cup of foaming cacao is passed, bitter heat blooming on tongues, and laughter drifts up to the rafters as someone cracks a joke about the groom learning to like his tortillas less burnt. You could swear the hearth answers with a happy pop. You look for the shadow of the horrific in all this and find something quieter, constraint. Every part is prescribed, each promise pinned to augury and household economies. The fear tonight is not of jaguars or gods, but of misalignment, choosing the wrong day, the wrong omen, the wrong alliance. In a world where drought can shrink a village to a whisper, a bad match isn't just awkward, it's existential. The cenote took a body for rain. The courtyard takes two lives and knots them into a weather pattern of chores, affection, and daily courage. A boy tiptoes through with a bowl of atole and steals a sip. His grandmother gives him a look that could shatter obsidian. You grin, third joke earned, and then catch the bride smoothing the mat's frayed edge with a weaver's instinct. She glances at the groom, who is studiously not noticing the way people look away from comets, and first smiles. Whatever affection they grow will have to climb a trellis of obligations. It's not romantic in the modern sense, but it's sturdy. Your history brain nudges you with caveats. Spanish friars recorded startlingly young marriage ages in some regions, yet those same texts bristle with bias and misunderstanding. Historians still argue whether girls commonly married at early puberty across the Maya world, or whether age norms varied widely by class, era, and town. The truth likely braided practicality with politics. In elite houses, alliances mattered more than birthdays. In common homes, an extra pair of hands could be the difference between harvest and hunger. None of that excuses harm. It explains the architecture of choice in a climate where the sky was both pantry and judge. The daykeeper closes his almanac, satisfied. He marks the chosen date with a tiny glyph drawn in ash on the door. The matchmaker recites the exchange one last time, and a chorus of "it shall be so" rolls around the courtyard like a soft drum. The families eat. Tortillas steam. Someone produces a gourd of pulque, and laughter ripples again, the easy, sleepy kind that follows decisions finally made. You taste the drink and wince. The aunt beside you pats your shoulder, as if to say, "You'll acquire the taste or you won't, and we'll drink your share." Before you leave, the bride kneels at the hearth and adds a pinch of ground cacao to the flames. The smoke that rises is warm, almost chocolate sweet, and for an instant it reminds you of the blood smoke on the temple platform. Two offerings, same ladder. The night folds in, and far above, Venus slants toward dawn, that faithful clock the priest saluted earlier. You take one last look at the knotted garments, at the 3 stones glowing like small suns, and you feel it's that blend of comfort and control, of home as ritual, of love as something you practice until it feels like weather. The night stretches on, and the clearing feels tighter, as though the jungle itself is closing in around you. The dancers step slow, the drums fade to a deep pulse, and the priest begins his work. His hands are steady as he lifts the chords. You expect hesitation, maybe even a show of mercy, but no. The chords are pressed to his tongue, dragged slowly across, leaving rivulets of blood that catch the torchlight in a grotesque shimmer. You hear a collective hiss from the villagers, not of fear, but of awe. To them, this act is a gift, a necessary release of life force that pleases the gods. You realize that for the Maya, sexuality and sacrifice aren't separate compartments, they're intertwined. Fertility wasn't only about crops or children, it was about cosmic balance. When a priest bled his own tongue, or, even more painfully, his genitals, he was symbolically inseminating the universe with vitality. The gods received blood as proof that the cycle of creation and destruction could continue. You shift, uncomfortably, because in this worldview, intimacy itself becomes a ritual transaction. Historians confirm that bloodletting was central to Maya religious life. The most sacred blood was considered to be from the tongue, the ear, or the genitals, places tied directly to speech, hearing, divine will, and reproduction. The idea was that personal pain released sacred energy, and when that energy was bound to sexuality, the offering doubled in potency. You glance up at the priest, his chin wet and trembling, and you feel the weight of this belief pressing against your modern sensibilities. The villagers begin to chant again, their voices weaving like threads. The woman in jade steps closer, kneeling before the priest. You notice that she doesn't flinch when he dips a thorned cord into her hand and gestures for her to continue the ritual herself. She raises it toward her lips, and your stomach turns. But there's no protest from the crowd, only reverence. Her blood, like his, is considered sacred fuel. Here's where things get even stranger. Some scholars suggest that these rituals weren't merely about devotion, but also about inducing visions. The pain and blood loss could send participants into trance-like states. Combined with hallucinogens like morning glory seeds or fermented pulque, these experiences blurred the line between physical suffering and ecstatic union with the gods. Historians still argue whether these trances were intended as literal communication with deities, or simply as symbolic theater. Either way, the atmosphere was charged with intensity you can almost feel in your chest. The drums pick up again, louder. Now, thumping like the earth itself has a heartbeat. You can see villagers swaying, some clutching one another, some whispering prayers. A child tugs at her mother's sleeve, her eyes wide with both fear and pride. It's clear, even the youngest here understand the gravity of what's happening, that their survival, their crops, their very lives hinge on these moments. You might laugh a little nervously and think, glad my idea of sacrifice is skipping dessert. That's the modern aside creeping in. But for the Maya, dessert wasn't optional, it was divine expectation. Miss a ritual, and you risked drought, famine, or worse, the gods turning their gaze away entirely. Your eyes drift upward again, and you catch sight of Venus twinkling in the eastern sky. The morning star, rising faint and clear, marks something important. The priest notices it too, raising his bloodied hands in salute. You remember the quirky tidbit. Venus wasn't just a pretty star, but a cosmic clock for the Maya. Battles were planned according to its cycles, marriages aligned with its phases. And here tonight it seems to bless the ritual with its cold light. The woman in jade finally lowers the thorned cord. Blood streaks her chin, but her eyes are steady. The crowd exhales, as though some tension has been released. You feel a ripple in the air, not unlike the silence after thunder. It's as if the entire jungle has paused to listen for a divine reply, and then you hear it. Not a voice, but a shift. The torch atop the pyramid sputters, flares, then steadies again. The people gasp, convinced it's a sign of approval. You may doubt the gods are watching, but in this place, in this moment, belief itself is tangible. You can't help but feel the hair rise on your arms. You catch a glimpse of carved stele nearby, depicting scenes of rulers piercing themselves in similar fashion. Their blood, dripping onto bark paper, was sometimes burned so that smoke could carry the essence skyward. One inscription even describes the blood as precious rain, a chilling reminder of how intimately tied sex, blood, and survival were in this world. You shift your feet, aware of the sticky ground beneath you, the mix of resin, sweat, and iron scent heavy in the air. You realize this isn't just ritual theater. This is survival written in flesh. The Maya didn't separate body from cosmos. Your very veins were part of the machinery that kept the universe spinning. And tonight, you've stumbled right into the gears. The drums recede again, soft as a heartbeat fading into silence, and the crowd shifts toward the edge of the clearing. You notice the path leading away from the pyramid descends into a limestone depression, its jagged rim faintly lit by torches carried by attendants. You follow the flow of villagers, your steps crunching against shells and scattered pebbles, until you find yourself gazing down into one of the most dreaded places in Maya cosmology, a cenote. The pool of water below gleams black, reflecting only a thin slice of the moon. Humid air rises, cool against your skin, tinged with the mineral temps of underground rivers. The villagers treat the spot with reverence. You can feel their collective unease. Cenotes were not only life-giving wells but also mouths to the underworld. To stand on its lip, was to lean into the abyss, where gods and ancestors listened. You glance sideways, and realize the young woman in jade beads has been brought here as well. Her face is still smeared with streaks of blood from the cord ordeal, but her steps are steady. She descends toward the water, guided by 2 attendants, and you realize what this means. Virgins, especially those marked by purity, were often chosen as offerings to the rain god Chalk, tossed into the dark water. Their bodies were thought to become messengers to the gods, bargaining on behalf of the community. That's the mainstream historical fact. Archaeologists have actually retrieved bones, jewelry, and even textiles from cenotes near Chichen Itza, confirming that human sacrifice was part of their ritual use. Many of those remains belonged to young women and children, their lives deliberately offered to ensure rainfall and fertility. It's one thing to read about this in a museum exhibit. It's another to stand at the rim tonight and hear the chant rise. The torches flicker, and a priest begins to recite, his voice echoing off limestone walls. The words spill like water, rhythmic and relentless, praising Chalk for past rains and begging for future storms. The villagers sway in unison, their fear mingling with faith. You can't shake the thought that every raindrop they drink might feel, to them, like a gift paid for in human life. Then comes the quirky tidbit. Some chronicles claim that not all who were cast into cenotes died. Certain ceremonies allowed victims to be retrieved later, drenched and half drowned, but considered spiritually transformed. Survivors were treated as having spoken directly with the gods. It's the ancient equivalent of a near-death experience. Experience X. It was deliberately engineered. Historians still argue whether this was symbolic drama or a real attempt at divine communication. Either way, the idea that a soaked, shivering survivor could be paraded back as a prophet is as haunting as it is fascinating. The drums strike again, sharp and hollow, and the woman in jade kneels at the edge. You hold your breath, expecting cries, a struggle, but no. Her arms are lifted skyward, her face calm as the attendants clasp her hands. She seems almost eager, as though stepping into the cenote means stepping into a destiny promised since birth. The villagers murmur blessings, and you sense they are envious, not horrified. The priest raises his staff. A final chant breaks the night, and then she's gone. Her body arcs briefly in the torchlight before vanishing with a splash into the black water below. The ripples spread wide, silver under the moon, before dissolving into stillness. You feel your chest tighten. The silence is heavy, broken only by frogs croaking and an owl's distant call. The villagers lean forward, some tossing offerings of jade beads, others dropping kernels of maize. The cenote accepts it all with indifference. You realize you're staring into a well that has swallowed countless lives. Each one a coin tossed into a divine wishing pool. Each one a desperate plea to a rain god. It's hard not to whisper a nervous joke to yourself. Imagine trying to explain to your modern neighbors that your water bill was paid with human sacrifices. The humor is bitter, but it cuts through the weight of the moment. A breeze moves across the clearing, rattling leaves, and you notice something subtle. The air feels cooler, as though the gods have exhaled. The villagers take this as a sign. Some smile, others wipe tears, and a child claps quietly, oblivious to the gravity of the loss. Belief is its own form of comfort, binding them all in a certainty you can't share, but can only witness. The priest finally steps back, his eyes shining with reflected torchlight. He declares the offering accepted. The villagers nod and slowly disperse, their footsteps crunching back up the limestone rim. The water remains still, but you can't help feeling it's alive, as though eyes watch you from beneath the surface. You linger, reluctant to turn away. A frog splashes, a ripple spreads. For a moment, you imagine the young woman swimming in shadowed caverns, her arms outstretched, carrying prayers toward Chalk's hidden palace. Maybe she will speak for them. Maybe she will be devoured. Historians still debate how literally the Maya took these sacrifices, whether they were acts of pure symbolism or desperate bargains in a climate where drought could mean extinction. But standing here, with the jungle heavy and the water black, you understand something chilling. For the Maya, horror was not entertainment. It was insurance. The villagers drift back toward the pyramid, their footsteps hushed on the jungle floor. You linger for a moment at the cenote, the air cool against your skin, until the sound of conch horns summons you onward. The procession leads you toward a raised platform where flickering torches throw jagged light across carved stone. Here, another ritual is about to unfold, one that brings you uncomfortably close to the edge of devotion and endurance. The thorned cord ordeal. You spot the bundles again, cords threaded with stingray spines and obsidian shards, glistening in the firelight. They look like torture instruments, but in the hands of Maya priests, they are tools of communion. The idea is simple, in the bleakest sense. Draw blood from the most sensitive parts of the body, spill it onto bark paper, and burn it so the smoke can reach the gods. This wasn't casual theater, it was cosmic negotiation. The priest steps forward, his lips already cracked and darkened from earlier cuts, and kneels before a small altar. He presses the thorned cord to his tongue, dragging it slowly through, the spines tearing skin like paper. You hear the faint, wet sound and can't help wincing. The crowd doesn't look away. They murmur reverently, because in their eyes, this isn't cruelty, it's fertility, vitality, and proof of divine loyalty. And here's the historical fact to anchor it. Bloodletting, or auto-sacrifice, was one of the most widespread and important rituals in Maya culture. Men and women alike participated. Kings were expected to pierce their tongues, queens their lips or genitals, and even commoners sometimes followed suit during festivals. The blood was caught on bark paper, which was then burned, sending living smoke skyward. Archaeologists have found charred remains of such papers in temple sites across the Maya world. The drums pick up, low and steady. The priest passes the cord to another participant, a noblewoman draped in embroidered cotton. She accepts it with calm dignity, raising it toward her lower abdomen. You feel your stomach knot as she begins her part of the ritual. To the Maya, this act symbolized birth, renewal, and the fertilization of the earth itself. Pain wasn't humiliation, it was power. The quirky tidbit: stingray spines were especially prized for these rituals. Why? Because they inflicted maximum bleeding and pain, which was considered more potent. Some scholars argue the choice wasn't symbolic at all. Stingray wounds, with their toxins, could cause intense hallucinations. That means bloodletting wasn't just an act of sacrifice. It was a doorway to visions, where participants might believe they met gods face to face. Historians still argue whether these visions were genuine mystical experiences, or simply the result of trauma and toxins overwhelming the body. Either way, the Maya treated them as messages from beyond. The crowd leans closer as the noblewoman's blood stains the bark paper. An attendant carefully collects it, folds it, and places it into a clay vessel. The vessel is set upon hot coals, and soon, smoke curls upward in delicate ribbons. The villagers watch, eyes wide, as though the smoke itself is a bridge. You feel it, too, that unsettling sense that the line between mortal and divine has blurred. And then something eerie happens. The flames flare unexpectedly, blue at the edges, and the smoke twists into shapes that almost look like serpents. The villagers gasp. Some raise their arms, convinced they are witnessing the gods responding in real time. You blink hard, trying to convince yourself it's just airflow, just coincidence. But in this charged atmosphere, even your rational mind begins to falter. The priest, now pale but steady, begins to chant. His voice wavers, but his eyes burn with conviction. He thanks the gods for hearing, for accepting. Around you, villagers whisper blessings, and children clutch their mothers' hands. watching with a mixture of fear and pride. It's strange, but you realize the children are not horrified. They are inspired. To them, this is heroism, an act of cosmic generosity. You shift your weight uneasily, and the smell of blood and burning bark presses into your senses. You remember the cenote splash, the woman's calm face, and now the deliberate self-inflicted pain. It dawns on you that the Maya saw no clean line between body and cosmos. Every vein, every drop, was part of a vast system of exchange. To live was to owe, and to pay was to bleed. You want to joke, just to break the heaviness. Maybe something, like suddenly, donating at the Red Cross seems like a bargain. The humor is thin, but it offers a moment's breath. The ritual continues. The noblewoman sways slightly, her face pale, but attendants fan her gently, offering her cacao drink to restore strength. Even in suffering, there's dignity. You notice how carefully the community supports her, not mocking, not recoiling, but honoring her sacrifice. It's as though pain itself has become a communal feast, shared and sanctified. Finally, the smoke thins, the cords are set aside, and the crowd exhales as one. The torches sputter. Somewhere in the jungle, a jaguar growls low, and the villagers freeze, then murmur that it's a sign. To them, the gods have answered. To you, it's a chilling reminder of the line between ceremony and survival. Blurred in the thick night air, you look back at the altar, the smoldering coals, and the last curls of smoke drifting skyward. You don't know whether the gods were listening, but the Maya believed it with every beat of their hearts. And in this moment, under the canopy and stars, you feel the gravity of their devotion pressing down like the humid air itself. By late afternoon, the royal compound loosens its braid, and courtyards tilt toward festival. Smoke lifts in calmer spirals, musicians warm conch shells and flutes, and a low murmur hums along the painted walls the way bees hum around a hollow log. You follow the sound to a shaded patio where women rinse gourds and men carry sloshing jars from a cool pit. The scent is sweet-sour, half orchard, half thunderstorm. This is the brewery of night. Honey drinks, maize brews, cacao, and things stronger than either your doctor or your common sense would recommend. Desire, here, is not an accident. It is distilled, stirred, and scheduled. On a bench beside the pit sits a cylindrical hive of stingless bees shoon in cab. Royal ladies, their entrance a tiny door in the wood. A caretaker touches the log like a friend's shoulder, checking its weight. You realize the honey inside is more than food. It is a temple guest list. Some of it dissolves into warm water with strips of fragrant bark. The mix tucked into a jar and coaxed into a slow, patient ferment. Mainstream fact for your map. Among the Maya, a ritual drink called balch honey, fermented with the bark of the balch tree, was a favored intoxicant, especially for ceremonies that asked people to open their bodies and their certainty. This isn't your roommate's kombucha. This is astronomy with bubbles. Cacao, of course, gets its own altar. 2 attendants pour it from height until the foam stacks like storm clouds. Chili and vanilla whisper through the steam. You laugh under your breath first joke, because you suddenly understand ancient status updates. Tonight's mood, extra foam. A boy tries the trick and splashes himself. A grandmother wipes his cheek with a sigh that could polish jade. As the light thins, dancers arrive in masks. The young maize god radiant with green plumes, a moon maiden with a painted water lily, an old jaguar goddess whose eyes narrow like secrets. The pairing is not idle costume design. It's choreography for a cosmology that treats attraction as weather. Priests pace the periphery, measuring time with glances at the eastern sky. Venus will rise later, and the moment it does, the night's script will quicken. You feel the calendar in your bones the way you felt the drums last night. A scribe hands you a gourd of balch. The first sip is shy. The second is confident. The third is a rumor. that maybe the stars know your name. The patio softens at the edges. Laughter slides around corners. A woman passes with a bundle of white flowers frangipani. Sweet as memory, Anne drops a petal into a brazier, where it sizzles and releases a perfume that makes your shoulders loosen. You remember the domestic steadiness of the 3 hearth stones, then remember the thorned chords. Then realize you're standing in a world where comfort and ordeal are merely different doors to the same room. Mainstream fact. Number 2. If you're collecting. Classic period Maya pottery often depicts enema rituals, with attendants holding gourd syringes and celebrants reclining, sometimes amid musicians and drinkers. Whether the vessels delivered bouch, maize beer, or stronger infusions, the goal was swift, overwhelming intoxication. Visions loosened like knots. The painted scenes are frank, but not crude, a reminder that the body itself was a temple tool. In the courtyard tonight, you see attendants preparing bulbous gourds, their cords braided, stoppers laid neatly on a cloth. No one snickers. The air around the table is as reverent as a scribe's desk. A drummer begins the festival's heartbeat. Dancers spiral into the plaza, hands fluttering like moths, hips drawing slow circles under the mask's fixed faces. You catch the pattern. Couples orbit, separate, rejoin, each encounter a polite collision of deities. Desire is staged as a series of recognition. Seed meets soil, rain meets blossom, moon meets tide. The crowd copies the steps more simply, and you find yourself moving to your feet, choosing a path that feels older than your doubts. Quirky tidbit for your pocket. Some jars of bouch are perfumed with flowers or tree resins, and a few ritual recipes call for a nip of chili nut, enough to burn, just enough to lift the pulse. One elder swears, with a smile, that a pinch of ground cacao in the honey makes the gods dance faster. He winks like you're in on the recipe. You promise not to tell the daykeeper, who probably knows anyway. Historians still argue whether the strongest festival mixtures hid psychoactive barks or mushrooms, along with honey, citing mushroom stones from highland Guatemala as clues. Others say the stones are more about status or phallic fertility than chemistry, and the debate keeps entire conference panels awake long after the hotel coffee gives up. Night throws its first blue shawl over the plaza. You notice braziers set at the 4 corners, each one smudging the air with copal and something sweeter, maybe crushed vanilla pods. The musicians trade flutes for rattles. The maize god meets the moon maiden in the center, their masks almost touching. The crowd inhales as if the sky hinges on this nearness. The priest makes a circular gesture, and couples echo it like ripples on a pond. You expected chaos. What you get is liturgy with hips. You try to picture how a friar would describe this scene, then try to forget that picture. Colonial writers often framed indigenous festivals with a single moral brush, finding sin where choreography lived. A few even hinted at temple courtesans, but the sources tangle gossip with zeal. Historians still argue whether sacred sexuality in the Maya world meant structured, role-bound intimacy inside ritual space, or whether the charge of temple prostitution is a Spanish projection that tells us more about the friars than the festivals. What's certain is that desire here is not private fireworks. It's civic infrastructure. It feeds fields and calendars, not only hearts. Venus peaks Upa, cold pin over the eastern Treesand. The plaza tilts, dancers quicken, musicians brighten, and you feel the belch's gentle hands on your balance. A steward offers a plate of tamales, mercy disguised as hospitality. You take 2 and discover that corn tastes like a life raft. Second joke slips out of you. Note to self, don't ritual on an empty stomach. And the steward nods as if he's heard it in every era. At the patio's edge, a long bench has been laid with cloths, gourds, and the infamous syringes. No one boasts. No one dares you. They simply prepare. A celebrant reclines. An attendant whispers. Another steadies a shoulder. The faces are sober, focused, oddly tender. You're struck by the absence of spectacle. Whatever visions the practice, summons are not for the crowd. They are for the contract. The same contract that asked the noblewoman to bleed smoke. The same contract that sent a jade-draped girl into dark water. Here, too, the body becomes a letter written to gods. Your modern brain rummages for safety. Disclaimer: third joke. Please consult your physician before beginning any cosmological exercise program. But the humor fades as the breathing slows and his gaze drifts to some place your eyes can't follow. The musicians shift to a lower mode. The dancers sway as if lullabied, and the air grows thick with a waiting you remember from the Sunati Rim. A priest in a white cloak moves through the crowd with a bowl of water, perfumed with crushed leaves. He flicks droplets onto foreheads and wrists, and when they land on you, the scent snaps you awake, cool, green, like shade you can drink. The bowl stops at the masked moon maiden. She cups her hands and washes her cheeks, a gesture half ablution, half flirt. The maze god tilts his head, and for a heartbeat their costumes feel less like theater and more like gravity, another mainstream fact hums beneath the music. Pilgrimages to shrines of the goddess Ix, Chelpatron of weaving, childbirth, and sometimes love drew women across the Yucatan in the post-classic period, and her rites braided fertility, desire, and healing. You think of the midwives you'll meet later, and of how likely it is that they stand among you now, watching the dance with eyes that can read tides inside a wrist pulse. The night rounds down slightly, as if someone turned the moon a fraction dimmer. Along the wall, two elders start the story singing slow, flowering verses about twins who trick lords of the underworld, about a turtle that opens like a drum. The courtyard listens the way fields listen for rain. Desire, it turns out, can be quiet too. When the celebrant finally sits up, cheeks flushed, eyes wet with whatever he saw, the attendants ease him to a bench and press a cacao gourd into his hands. He nods, breathes, smiles like a person who survived both a storm and the breakfast after. You feel your shoulders drop, and you realize the plaza has exhaled with him. The priest looks east again. Venus burns brighter, and then steadies a lighthouse, pinned to the heavens. You stand there a few heartbeats longer, cataloging what the night taught you. Honey can be a key, choreography can be a prayer, and a body carefully, dangerously can be a bridge. You think back to the crocodile dung sunscreen joke from the first clearing, then to the 3 hearthstones, then to the HR schedule harem, and you understand that the same civilization that bled smoke also brewed sweetness. The same hands tying marriage knots, also whisking foam into a cloud. Somewhere, a dog barks, a baby laughs in its sleep, and a woman by the bee-log hums to the hive so softly you barely hear it. The festival will go on for hours yet, but your pulse has learned a slower drum, the one that lets a human being drift toward tomorrow without breaking on its edge. Asterisk. The plaza empties slowly, shadows lengthening as the sun slants low across the jungle canopy. You follow a group of villagers carrying baskets of maize and bundles of flowers down a limestone trail. The air grows cooler, damper. A hush settles, not of fatigue, but of awe. The path opens once again to the rim of a cenotathus, one larger, darker, more commanding. You know the story already. Cenotes are mouths to the underworld, but tonight, you'll feel how they could swallow more than water. Tonight, you stand at the cenote of sexual sacrifice. The surface gleams black, a mirror broken only by the occasional ripple of bats skimming low. Torches line the rim, their reflections jagged, flickering like restless spirits. The villagers form a circle, each clutching maize ears dyed red, bundles of fragrant flowers, or folded mantles. These are the ordinary gifts. But there is another offering, heavier, hushed about in whispers. A union of desire and death. Here's your mainstream fact. At Chichen Itza's famous sacred cenote, Divers have recovered bones of men, women, and children, along with gold, jade, textiles, and even carved rubber balls. The evidence confirms that humans were sacrificed here, sometimes violently, sometimes ceremonially plunged into the deep waters as emissaries to Chak, the rain god. It wasn't only about sustenance. It was about sealing cosmic contracts with the most intimate of currencies: flesh, blood, and, sometimes, sexuality. 2. Attendance guide forward. A para, young man painted blue, and a young woman draped in white cotton, embroidered with red spirals. Their faces are calm, almost serene, but their eyes gleam with something between terror and trance. The priest recites their lineage, names that tie them to noble houses. They are not commoners. They are bargaining chips, alliances made incarnate. Quirky tidbit: Spanish chroniclers, ever eager for scandal, wrote luridly about virgins dedicated to Chak, even describing rituals of coupling before sacrifice. Modern scholars warn us that much of this may reflect European projection more than Maya reality. Still, enough hints remain in the glyphs and oral traditions to suggest that fertility and sexuality were braided into these offerings. Historians still argue whether the pairings were literal consummations or symbolic unions, enacted in costumed dances before the plunge. The priest lifts a conch shell and blows. The sound reverberates like a whale's cry across stone and water. The couple kneels, hands bound loosely with a red cord. Villagers step forward to brush them with flower bundles, murmuring blessings. Some dab their own blood on the captives' skin, marking them as vessels. You shiver at the intimacy of the act. It's not mockery, it's transfer. Every touch says, "Take my burden, take my drought, take my hunger into the depths." The young man is led first to the edge. He raises his chin as attendants hold him steady. The crowd chants Chak's name, each syllable striking like rain against stone. Without struggle, he is tipped forward. His body arcs briefly in torchlight, then vanishes, with a splash that swallows the sound. Ripples spread, then fade, leaving only black glass. The young woman remains kneeling. The priest traces glyphs in ash across her forehead, symbols for fertility, maize, and the moon. Then she, too, is guided to the edge. Her white mantle gleams, ghost-like, before she disappears into the cenote with barely a sound. The silence afterward is suffocating. Only frogs croak, and an owl hoots once, sharp. The villagers lean forward, tossing in their flowers and maize. Some weep softly, others lift their arms skyward. To them, this is not cruelty, but covenant, an act of cosmic intimacy binding heaven and earth. You stand there, sick and mesmerized, realizing the water has become both womb and tomb. You mutter a nervous joke, just to steady yourself, and, "I thought my local swimming pool rules were strict," but the humor dies in your throat as the torchlight flickers. The cenote seems to breathe. The priest declares the union sealed. The red cord, now empty, is burned, its smoke spiraling upward. The villagers sigh in relief, convinced the rains will come, the fields will green, the gods appeased. You're left with the heavy knowledge that, here, sexuality wasn't private or sacred in the way you imagine it was public. Dangerous, a bargaining chip thrown into black water. Historians still argue, was this truly sexual sacrifice, or did the Spaniards embroider stories to shock their readers? Yet the bones in the cenotes whisper their own truth, that Bodhis entered willingly or unwillingly, clothed or unclothed, alive or lifeless. However you interpret it, the result was the same: intimacy bound to death, desire folded into dread. You step back from the rim, the torchlight trembling on your skin. For a moment, you swear the cenote watches you, its depths as patient and unfathomable as the gods themselves. The path from the cenote winds back toward the temple precinct, where the night feels heavy with smoke and echoing drums. You've seen blood, you've seen binding, you've seen water turn into a cosmic mouth. Now you're about to glimpse the most unnerving layer of all the gods themselves, demanding not just flesh, not just sacrifice, but flesh and seed together. Torches flare around a carved altar shaped like a crouching jaguar, its stone teeth bared. Priests paint themselves with black soot, their mouths streaked crimson. They dance in spirals, clashing rattles of turtle shell, and every step feels like the jungle's own heartbeat. Overhead, the sky seems closer than before, the stars sharper. The villagers whisper names. Ichizena, Ixkel, Shakia Puch. Deities of sky, fertility, rain, death, but not just those you hear quieter, stranger names. Some gods are said to hunger for blood mixed with life essence, the energy of creation itself. Mainstream fact, Maya mythology includes gods with sexualized qualities. The moon goddess Ixchel, associated with fertility and sometimes eroticism. The hero twins who tricked lords of the underworld through symbolic acts of rebirth. Maize gods who die and are reborn through acts that echo both sex and sacrifice. Rituals frequently merged fertility symbolism with bodily offerings, so that blood was treated as seed, and seed as blood. The priest kneels before the jaguar altar and sprinkles maize kernels across its back. He lifts a bowl, filled with blood and what looks like ground cacao. He pours it slowly, the mixture dripping like dark rain between the jaguar's teeth. The villagers chant in low unison, voices trembling. Quirky tidbit: cacao was not only a drink of elites, but also a ritual stand-in for semen. When mixed with blood, it became a potent symbol of both male and female fertility, life and sacrifice blended into one offering. Archaeologists have found painted vessels that show gods consuming this mixture, their eyes wild with power. You swallow hard, because suddenly that foamy cacao from the marriage courtyard feels less like dessert and more like cosmic paperwork. A dancer steps forward in a mask shaped like a serpent. He sways with exaggerated hips, the gesture both comic and unsettling, drawing laughter from children and solemn nods from elders. The villagers treat the dance as sacred paradia, performance of gods, who blur the lines between worship, desire, and violation. You almost smile first joke? The world's oldest awkward fertility skit. But the crowd's seriousness pulls you back. The priest calls for silence. He speaks of Chak, the rain god, who hungers not just for water's return, but for the essence that makes fields green. He tells of Ixchel, the moon goddess, who demands both pain and pleasure as proof of devotion. He describes gods who take lovers among mortals, slipping into hammocks in dreams, leaving behind sickness or fertility, depending on their whim. The villagers nod, solemn and unshaken. To them, the god's intimacy is as real as drought. Here's your open debate. Historians still argue whether sexual rites described in colonial account sacks between humans enacting gods were literal or symbolic. Some say the Spaniards exaggerated, scandalized by dances and fertility imagery. Others believe there were indeed ritualized unions, possibly masked performances that symbolized divine copulation. Without clear records, the truth remains hazy, suspended like smoke over the altar. You step closer and see another vessel, placed on the jaguar's back. It holds a mixture of honey and pulque, thick and golden. The priest dips his fingers, traces a spiral on the altar, then presses his hand to his own chest. The crowd exhales softly, recognizing the gesture. To them, it means renewal, rebirth, continuity. To you, it feels like watching someone fuse. Prayer and parody, love and terror, all in one trembling moment. The dancers whirl again. The serpent mask replaced by one of a toad, then a deer. Each creature moves with exaggerated desire, a reminder that even animals carried sexual power in Maya cosmology. The deer bows, the toad leaps, the serpent coils movements both laughable and sacred. You allow yourself a second joke. If this is a dating show, The toad is not winning, and yet you notice no one laughs around you. Here, even humor is part of devotion. The crowd grows louder, their voices calling the gods to accept. A sudden clap of thunder splits the night, though the sky remains clear. Gasps ripple across the circle. The villagers raise their arms, convinced. The gods have answered, pleased with the mingling of blood and seed. You stand frozen, wondering if thunder really struck from a dry sky, or if your ears imagined it in the drumbeat. Finally, the priest takes the crackle blood mixture, now frothy, and burns the remainder in a clay bowl. The smoke rises thick and sweet, curling into the sky. Villagers kneel, foreheads pressed to earth. The dancers collapse in exhaustion, their masks slipping, revealing faces drenched with sweat. The torchlight flickers across the jaguar altar, and for a moment its stone eyes glint, as if alive. You feel your skin prickle. To the Maya, gods were not distant abstractions. They were immediate, hungry presences, satisfied only when flesh, blood, and fertility were woven into a single, risky offering. You take a step back, whispering your third nervous joke just to steady your nerves. And I thought Valentine's Day was stressful. But as the smoke curls upward, and the villagers hum with relief, you realize this isn't about romance or holiday sweetness. It's about survival, written in the language of intimacy, carved into stone, breathed into smoke. The smoke from the jaguar altar still clings to your hair when morning returns you to quieter thresholds, door lintels chalked with day signs, courtyards where metate stones hum, hammocks still gently swaying from the night's dreams. You're thinking about gods who demanded blood and seed. And then, like stepping from storm to ledger, you find yourself in a house where a girl's braid, a chalk mark on wood, and a basket of cacao beans decide the rest of her life. This is the child bride conundrum, where love is less a spark than a calendar entry that someone else inked. A daykeeper sits cross-legged by the hearth, fingers stained with copal, reading the turning gears of the tea. Parents wait, not holding hands, but holding their breath. The girl keeps her eyes on the floor. She is small, but not a child in the way your modern brain wants to insist. She mills maize like a professional, and ties knots you'd need a YouTube tutorial for. Still, a hush hangs over the room that smells like wet clay and new responsibilities. You suddenly miss those hyperactive age verification pop-ups on modern websites' first joke be, 'cause here, the only "are you sure?" is a priest murmuring day names to a hearth. Mainstream historical fact to hold steady. Marriages among the Maya were often arranged by families through a matchmaker, timed to auspicious days. Colonial accounts like Diego de Landa S. in Yucatán report that girls could be married quite young, early teens by some reckonings, while boys tended to marry later, after proving themselves in fields and service. But the record is a patchwork quilt. Ages varied by era, region, and status, and what the friars called a marriage sometimes looks, under closer scrutiny, like betrothal or household placement, with consummation delayed. The matchmaker arrives, with bracelets, chiming a familiar figure from the courtyard where you watched older couples, tied by omen. Today her voice is gentler, her math precise. Bride wealth is carefully listed: cotton mantles, a sack of salt, obsidian blades, maybe a small plot's harvest obligations. She speaks to the girl's mother about weaving skill. She speaks to the father about the groom's field rose, straight as a spear shaft. If doom had a spreadsheet, it would look kinder than this. Yet the people in the room don't see doom. They see insurance food in thin years, defenders in bad ones, a place for a daughter under a roof that can keep rain and stories. A midwife steps from the shade, palms scented with herbs, and her presence retilts the axis. She has delivered half this patio to the world and will, if omens hold, deliver the girl's first child too. Softly, she asks questions that are half medical, half cosmic. Has the girl bled yet? Does her pulse beat in the cool rhythm or the warm? Is the household fire healthy? If the answer to that first question is no, the midwife recommends a period of residence, learning, and watchfulness before a marriage is fully opened. You feel the room exhale. The knot may be tied now, but not all knots pull tight at once. Quirky tidbit for your pocket. Adolescent beauty and maturity markers among the Maya sometimes included tooth filing or, in late knee, bits of jade or pyrite set into the front teeth, or edges filed into elegant notches. It sounds brutal to a modern jaw, but to them it signaled status, skill, and readiness to leave childhood's plain surface for adulthood's patterned face. You watch an elder run a respectful finger along the girl's unaltered teeth and nod, as if to say, soon, when the omen says, somewhere your dentist sighs in the distance. The groom's party arrives: uncles with good shoulders, an aunt with a hawk's eye for sloppy weaving, a boy carrying a gourd of cacao like sacred cargo. The groom is older, not a graybeard, but already sun-written across the brow. He tries not to look at the girl. The girl tries not to look at anyone. The matchmaker recites the obligations, then asks the daykeeper to name a first threshold, a moving-in day, a shared work day, a night for a small fire meal. A larger, more intimate threshold may wait on the midwife's word and the moon's mood. Historians still argue whether consummation followed immediately in most marriages, or was delayed until puberty's unmistakable signs. The documents won't agree, and neither will the villages separated by hills and dialects. You can feel the ethical heat rising behind your ribs, the modern recoil. The wish to time travel in with clipboards and consent workshops. You don't smother that feeling. You set it beside the work in this room. A household here is an engine that must not fail. The girl is a gear beginning to mesh. That truth doesn't excuse harm. It explains the gravity with which the midwife speaks, the tenderness with which the elder aunt adjusts the girl's hoopil, so it sits like a promise rather than a sentence. The daykeeper scratches a glyph on the lintel, 2 dots over a bar. The room's hum softens. An uncle offers the first basket of bride wealth. The girl's mother places a spindle whorl in her daughter's palm. The groom's father sets a digging stick on his son's shoulder. Cloth and corn, the matchmaker says, as if naming a duet. You remember the 3 hearthstones from the marriage courtyard and the foamed cacao from the night of desire. This, too, is a ritual, but without masks or thunder. Only the steady drum of daily bread. A brief commotion near the door. Someone glimpsed a screech owl on the fence. Omen, again. The daykeeper relights a twist of copal. Smoke draws a gentle barrier across the threshold, a privacy curtain for the future. He sprinkles a few cacao nibs into the coals. The scent rises warm. Not the jaguar altar's alarming sweetness, but a domestic cousin. You breathe it in and think of the Senate's black mirror, then of the thorned cords, then of that dreaded HR roster in the polygamy house. Across every scene runs the same thread, cosmic balance managed by intimate schedules. A grandmother leans toward you with a whisper barely louder than a loom sigh. Children must be planted where they live. It is both tender and terrifying. She points at the courtyard's corner, where a small ceiba sapling grows, staked with twine. We planted it when she was named, the grandmother says. We'll tie a new string when she moves. You glance at the sapling's leaves fluttering, like little hands, and swallow hard. Second joke arrives because your nervous system needs it. You imagine a modern guidance counselor trying to translate this day into a permission slip. Tick the box, if the moon agrees. The image cracks a grin out of the uncle with the cacao gourd. Even here, humor sneaks a chair. The matchmaker asks about bride services season, when the groom will work for the bride's parents, carrying water, splitting wood, bringing maize from field to stone. The groom nods. He'll sleep in a corner. Hammock can show up each dawn like a weather report with legs. The girl's mother's face softens. Work is the language she trusts more than promises. The midwife closes the circle with instructions you recognize from every culture that has ever tried to keep people safe. Go slowly. Listen to elders. Keep the fire bright. Call me if dreams turn heavy. She lays a palm against the girl's cheek, then surprisingly against the groom's. A soft house makes strong children, she murmurs. You tuck the line away like a good luck bead. Outside, light has climbed the wall. Bees fuss over squash blossoms. Someone laughs at a chicken. The day is outrageously normal. That's the strangest part. You came expecting a scandal. You found a system doing math with lives, sometimes gently, sometimes with a cold pencil. Historians still argue whether friars exaggerated early marriage to paint pagans as monstrous, or whether elite alliances truly pressed ages down. The fragments will never add up cleanly. What is clear is how carefully midwives, matchmakers, and daykeepers try to steer between drought and harm with the tools they have: calendars, stories, and watchful love. You step into the bright, and a boy races past, chasing a hoop, a dog clipped to his laughter. A woman calls the girl to grind maize with her 2 hands on one meditate, pressure shared. Third joke, softer now. You decide the only thing scarier than the god's ledger is the mother-in-law's checklist. Then you think of the crocodile dung sunscreen from our first night and nearly smile. In a world this sun-hard and omen-full, everyone is improvising shade. The midwife ties one last thread to the lintel, a tiny loop you'd miss if you blinked. For luck, she says. The girl touches it. Not quite a child, not yet a wife, poised like a seed under a thin layer of soil. The house breathes. The calendar turns a tooth. Asterisk. Midday heat presses the palace stones until they smell like baked lime and old incense. You slip through a side passage where murals fade into dusky red swords with jade on their ears. Queens with hair stacked like night clouds, and find yourself in a narrow chamber of names. A scribe kneels by a reed mat, unrolling a strip of bark paper painted with tiny glyphs, each one a family handhold. He doesn't look up. He is belaying a mountain. Mothers, fathers, marriages, alliances. You've wandered into the spine of the court, where love is a lineage problem and desire is rooted through algebra. Today's lesson is the hush behind the door, incest within noble houses. The scribe taps a glyph with his brush. Mother of the Holy Lord, he murmurs. Then another, Lady of the West City. The pattern repeats: foreign bride, local lord, cousin nodded to cousin. A widow remarried to a brother to keep tribute rivers flowing the same direction. The logic isn't romantic, it's hydraulic. You remember the polygamy ledger and almost see the ink lines between rooms. In this world, blood is a canal system, and the court spends all its daylight keeping the water inside the banks. Mainstream fact for your quiet pocket. Classic Maya inscriptions obsess over parentage. Titles like Holy Lord, Kayul, Ajah, appear beside child of glyphs. Monuments at places like Yaxtilan, Naranjo, Tikal, and Kalakmal record queenly arrivals from allied dynasties and carefully enumerate mothers as well as fathers. Marriages are political bridges, sometimes across jungles, sometimes across courtyards. Endogamy, marrying within a restricted elite circle, tightens those bridges until they're more like ropes. You ask about the taboo that in your world hums like an electric fence. The scribe's mouth makes a small line, a rope phrase if strangers tug at it, he says. Then, after a beat, a rope mildews if tied too tightly. He paints a small matte glyph pop, the emblem of rulership, the woven sea-tanned places. 2 smaller knots on its corners. Cousins, he suggests. Cross cousins, sometimes. Widows, 2 brothers. But sisters, 2 brothers. He squints at the ceiling, as if the answer might be written in smoke. Here's your open debate. Laid plainly, historians still argue whether the Maya ever sanctioned full sibling marriage the way the Inca famously did, or whether colonial writers and modern readers have mistaken divine sibling metaphors, maize god and moon, heroic twins, for human practice. Epigraphers see dynasties loop inward through cousins and political remarriages. Direct brother-sister unions remain unproven in the inscriptions. The silence isn't proof of absence, but it isn't proof of presence either. The argument sits on conference tables like an uninvited gourd of pulque. The scribe flips the bark paper and gestures toward a painted queen, her name ringed with foreign place signs. She arrived with a canoe of jade and a thundercloud for a father, he jokes softly. And you catch your first laugh of the section joke. 1. Because court poetry doesn't need fact-checking to be delicious. Behind the poetry is policy. Importing royal women spreads risk, grows cousins like vines across city-states, and gives future kings mothers whose names command obedience in 2 directions at once. You notice something else on the murals. The elegant, elongated heads of nobles, foreheads sloped like maize cobs. Quirky tidbit time. Elite infants often wore cradle boards or soft bindings that shaped the skull over months, producing a head profile prized for beauty and for echoing the maize god. Tooth inlays jade, pyrite, hematite, glinted when someone smiled. In a world without passports, skull and smile were documents. If you were selecting a spouse whose head literally matched the sacred grain, you were marrying a theology as much as a person. Your inner dentist whimpers. You pat it with a cacao foam memory and move on. A cool draft finds the chamber. The scribe's flame gutters, then steadies, like the Senate's breath, the night you watched it swallow the red-corded pear. He points to a narrow column of glyphs that keeps repeating a goddess's name. Mixed shell, moon woman, patron of weaving and childbirth. Mothers of kings weave the years, he says. When they come from the right loom, the cloth doesn't tear. You think of the 3 hearthstones and the midwife's palm on 2 cheeks. In this chamber, midwives and matchmakers extend into policy. A child's first swaddling is also the first draft of a treaty. You look for the edge where kinship turns in on itself too far and finds taboo. The scribe shrugs with a tired grace. He tells you of a widow who married her late husband's brother to anchor a child king, of a queen who came from a snake dynasty far to the west and became regent with a grip like braided agave, of a lord whose second wife was also his cousin, cementing a tax road with a baby's name. The line between prudent endogamy and dangerous closeness is policed not by a church, but by omen, gossip, and whether the gods keep raining. If crops fail, someone will whisper that the mat was woven wrong. Your modern brain, out of habit, reaches for a flowchart. Joke to one spools before you can stop it. Somewhere, a Maya daykeeper is the original Are You Two Related genealogical app. The scribe actually snorts quietly, reverently, but still a snort. We don't need a device, he says, tapping the glyphs. We have paper that remembers better than people. He rolls to a scene you recognize from night fires, bloodletting on lintels, a queen pulling a thorned cord through her tongue, while a king holds a torch. Lady Zakat Yaxtrelin comes to mind, though he doesn't say her name. When a queen bleeds the path open, he murmurs, ancestors come, marriages talk. The vision serpent that unfurls in those images is not about romance. It is about legitimacy. Who your mother is matters when you call the dead to attend your ceremony. You remember how the smoke on the temple platform looked like serpents, and the echo feels deliberate. Another roll of paper reveals tiny bundled glyphs around a king's name, a cluster that translates to child of so-and-so, grandchild of so-and-so. The mat's not. The court has turned ancestry into a prayer bead. You ask what happens when the bead string tangles, when cousins become too close for comfort. He shrugs again. Move a bride from farther away, adopt an heir, declare a child a younger sibling of the maize god, and let metaphor relieve the math. The system is flexible until drought. Then everyone becomes a critic with a very sharp obsidian. Sunlight slides a square onto the floor. Dust motes drift like tiny day signs. You feel the room's quiet press into your bones. The same hush you felt when the noblewoman steadied her breath before the cord. When the midwife laid her hand on two faces. When the principal wife beat a line of weft into place. Everything returns to pattern. Endogamy isn't a thrill here. It's pattern maintenance. The goal is not forbidden excitement, but predictable rain. The scribe caps his brush and finally looks at you. Do you have a word? He asks, for when a family keeps its shadow close so the house stays cool. You try to answer, but your vocabulary wants to prosecute or pardon. He pours you a little cacao, thin and unsweet, and the bitterness lands like a judge's gavel. Joke 3 forms as a safety valve in my world. We'd invite everyone to a very awkward holiday dinner and solve nothing. And he grins, as if he's seen 1,000 such dinners sketched on mats. On your way out, you pass a doorway where 2 children practice glyphs in dust with reeds. One writes his day sign, the other draws a maize ear. Their heads are gently sloped, their teeth still plain. A woman, perhaps a queen, perhaps a scribe's wife, adjusts a lumbar and hums a tune that might be a calendar. The court breathes. The rope holds, for now. Outside, Venus will return to the evening sky and someone will look up, counting the safe days between treaties and storms. You step back into heat, blinking. Somewhere far off, a conch sings. Somewhere nearer, a bee finds a flower, and the flower consents. You think of crocodile dung sunscreen, and almost laugh. People do what they can in the sun they're given. In this house of names, the shade is woven, knot by knot, air by air, and the gods are watching to see if the mat lies flat. The air grows heavier as you leave the palace corridors and follow a line of warriors toward the stockade at the city's edge. The smell changes to less incense, more sweat, iron, and fear. You've watched nobles bargain with calendars and blood, but here the story turns darker still. What happens when the captives of war become more than prisoners? What happens when humiliation itself is staged as ritual? Tonight, you'll step into the captive's degradation, where sexual symbolism turns conquest into theater. You hear it before you see it, a drum, with no melody, just a blunt pounding, like a heart forced to keep time. The warriors formed a rows. Between them shuffled the captives, wrists bound, backs painted with chalk. Some carry wooden collars, so wide they can't lower their heads. Their eyes scan the dirt, not daring to meet the torchlight. You've read of Maya ball courts, of captives paraded as players in a cosmic game. Now you understand that the game was more punishment than sport. Mainstream fact anchors this moment. Maya wars were not solely about land or tribute. They were about people, captives, who could be sacrificed, enslaved, or displayed to glorify a ruler. Hieroglyphic inscriptions often boast of kings taking lords in war, depicting them bound at the feet of their conquerors. These scenes aren't about battlefield heroics. They're about humiliation made permanent in stone. At the stockade, a platform waits. Carved panels depict bound men forced into postures that echo submission, their bodies bent in ways that blur pain and parody. The crowd jeers, but it's not amusement, it's affirmation. Humiliation is part of the payment owed to gods and ancestors. By watching, the people share in the victory. Quirky tidbit. Some accounts describe captives dressed in parody costumes, mock lords wearing oversized headdresses, painted faces made ridiculous, their forced dances meant to strip away dignity. Think of a cruel masquerade, where the joke isn't shared, but inflicted. You want to mutter. First joke, the world's oldest roast, minus the comedy club. But your throat sticks, because the laughter here isn't friendly. It's ritualized domination. The prisoners are led to the ball court, its walls looming, with carved rings high overhead. Tonight's game isn't Plate's prelude. 2 captives are shoved onto the court, handed heavy rubber balls almost as big as their torsos. They stumble, trying to balance, while warriors strike the ground with batons. The rules aren't explained, because there are none. The humiliation is the point. Historians still argue whether all captives forced into the ballgame were killed afterward, or whether some were spared for later sacrifice. The glyphs and murals suggest both outcomes. Some images show captives kneeling before kings with blood streaming from their bodies, while others suggest staged defeats and ritualized escapes. The ambiguity leaves modern scholars uncertain. Every game fatal, or were some performances designed only to display humiliation before eventual sale or enslavement? One captive slips, the ball crashing into his ribs. The crowd roars, not with joy but with approval. A priest steps forward, daubs his finger in red paint, and marks the man's chest with a crude glyph, meaning defeated. His partner collapses to his knees, and both are dragged off, jeered by the warriors. Praised by the villagers for serving as cosmic reminders. Losing means being owned. Body and soul. The symbolism sharpens when you see another prisoner forced to kneel beneath a warrior who places his foot on the captive's back. The pose mimics sexual domination, a message written in posture rather than flesh. To the Maya, conquest wasn't just military, it was intimate, a forced union of power and shame. The crowd nods solemnly. You grimace, whispering your second joke. HR would not approve of this office team-building exercise. Humor keeps you afloat, but barely. The priest raises a conch shell. Its sound shrill and cold. The next part of the ritual begins. Captives are marched to the altar steps, where they are ordered to carry heavy stones up the stairway, while villagers pelt them with maize husks. The gesture looks almost playful, but the symbolism bites grain. The very essence of life, hurled at those who failed to defend it. Each husk strike whispers, "You are not fertile. You are not strong. You are not ours." You think back to the Senate's black water, the jaguar altar's smoke, the child brides. Silent braid. Here, in the dust and jeers, the same logic unfolds. The body as currency, intimacy as stage, shame as spectacle. Even conquest has to be made visible, woven into the social fabric with symbols everyone can read. Historians still argue about the boundary between metaphor and act. Were these sexualized humiliations ever literal assaults, or were they ritual gestures, the foot on the back, the bent posture, the parody costumes fashioned to satisfy the gods' hunger for dominance? Evidence remains elusive, a shadow at the edge of glyphs. What's certain is that captives endured not just defeat, but transformation into living warnings. The drums thud again, and the captives are led away. The crowd disperses slowly, muttering, "Blessings to the gods of war and maize." You stand in the settling dust, the torchlight catching the edges of the ballcourt walls. The carvings seem to watch you, bent figures frozen forever, their humiliation carved deeper than flesh. Your third nervous joke slips out, dry as the dust. "Remind me never to lose at intramural sports here." It lands in your chest heavy as a rubber ball, because you know the truth. In this world, defeat is not measured in points, but in posture, and the gods expect their theater to be full. The dust of the ball court still clings to your sandals when you're pulled into another kind of gathering, louder, stranger, and somehow even more unnerving. The air carries the smell of roasted maize mixed with sweat and copal smoke. Drums beat a quicker rhythm this time, not the slow pulse of sacrifice, but the rapid thump of carnival. Tonight is no solemn offering. Tonight is reversal, chaos, parody, the masked festivals of reversal, where roles dissolve and desire wears a costume. You step into the plaza and blink. Villagers swirl in masks, deer heads with flapping ears, jaguar faces with wide grins, and grotesque parodies of nobles with painted wrinkles. Women don men's tunics, men prance in woven skirts. Children chase one another wearing oversized phallus effigies made from gourds, laughing so loudly it shakes the torches. A group of older women cluck like hens, mocking warriors with wooden spears. The line between holy and hilarious has never been thinner. Mainstream fact to anchor you. Maya festivals often included masked dances and role reversals. Colonial chroniclers, especially horrified friars, described rituals in which men dressed as women. Lords were mocked, and bawdy humor filled the air. These carnivalesque moments weren't random. They were ritual safety valves, giving communities sanctioned spaces to laugh at authority, invert norms, and release social pressure. The festivals echoed fertility symbolism too, with exaggerated costumes of sex organs and fertility gods. Quirky tidbit. Some post-classic dances used effigies shaped like animals or even exaggerated phallic gourds, which performers carried or wore to lampoon masculinity itself. A friar once complained about obscene dancing with gourds during village feasts, his scandalized tone practically dripping off the page. Whether he exaggerated or not, it's clear these moments of parody, unsettled European sensibilities. You almost laugh first, joke because you can picture a stiff friar clutching his rosary, while villagers snort into their pulque at the plaza's center. A dancer in a jaguar mask approaches a partner dressed as a moon goddess, but instead of solemn courtship, he trips and sprawls dramatically, drawing shrieks of laughter. Children pound the ground in glee. The joke is cosmic slapstick, gods mocked, myths inverted. The message isn't sacrilege. It's reassurance. Even the mightiest can stumble. And laughter itself keeps the world balanced. A group of men dressed as women clustered near the fire, gossiping in exaggerated falsettos, wagging fingers, swaying hips. Women respond by donning feathered helmets, stomping like warriors, shouting boasts. The inversion feels both ridiculous and strangely freeing. You realize gender, here, isn't just biology, it's performance, ritual, mask. For one night, people test the seams of identity and laugh while doing it. Historians still argue whether these festivals had explicit sexual components. Were the gourd effigies pure parody, or did they hint at fertility rites that once involved ritual unions in disguise? The record is hazy, filtered through scandalized Spanish eyes. But even stripped of exaggeration, the festivals clearly carried erotic charge, laughter, and release. A drummer quickens the beat. A masked lord staggers into the crowd, wearing an oversized nose and a cape too big for his frame. He's mocked mercilessly, his subjects chasing him with maize cobs, pelting him with husks. The joke lands sharp. Authority can be ridiculous. Power can wear a mask too. You grin second joke, history's first political cartoon, but with live actors. The villagers laugh, their faces glinting with torchlight, but beneath, the humor is seriousness. By mocking lords, men, women, even gods, the festival allows the community to breathe. Without release, authority suffocates. With release, life feels endurable. The parody protects the real order by allowing its temporary undoing. Then the dancers form a circle, masks bob, gourds sway, skirts flap. The music shifts into a frenzy, drums pounding, rattles shaking, conch shells blaring. The plaza feels alive, like a beating heart with too much blood. For a moment, the air tingles with something close to dangerous laughter, blurring into lust, parody blurring into permission. Couples drift into shadowed corners. Youths chase one another with shrieks that sound half joke, half invitation. You feel the tension, chaos as ritual, sexuality as carnival. An elder finally steps forward, waving a torch in slow arcs. The music softens, the crowd chuckles itself into quiet. Masks come off. A child's gourd effigy is tossed into the fire, popping like a kernel of maize. The release ends where it began, in flame, in laughter, in smoke curling toward the stars. You shake your head with your third nervous joke. So basically, Mardi Gras, but with maize husks and less plastic bead litter. You half expect someone to hand you a coconut drink. Instead, A woman in a warrior's helmet smiles knowingly and tosses you a tortilla. The humor is gentle, but the lesson stays sharp, even in a world of cenote sacrifices and thorned cords. Humans needed nights where gods could be mocked and gender could be tried on like a mask. The plaza empties, leaving only smoke and discarded flower petals. Somewhere in the distance, frogs croak, indifferent to gender parody and cosmic comedy alike. But you've seen how laughter, parody, and inversion kept the Maya world from tearing under its own weight. In this festival, horror loosened its grip. Desire wore a silly face, and survival borrowed humor for one night. By the time the sun leans white and high over the courtyard walls, the drums have fallen silent, and a different rhythm takes over. A breath in, a breath out, a low moan that rides the heat like a kite. You follow the sound to a shaded room, where a woman grips a loom beam with both hands, sweat beading along her lip. Beside her, a midwife kneels with the calm of a person who has met storms and learned their names. No masks, no jaguar altars, just a basket of herbs, a gourd of warm water, a folded length of woven cloth that looks, in this moment, like a rope tossed from shore. The thorned cords bled for the gods. This one is for a child. She wraps the cloth around the laboring belly and rocks, small and steady, teaching the body to remember the path. Your shoulders drop a fraction. Even the air learns to be quiet. The midwife murmurs the day signs as if their hand holds E for roads, Cain for yellow maize, Ix for the earth's cool skin, and taps the mother's wrist in time. In the space between pains, she jokes, gently, that the baby has inherited the father's love of sleeping in, that wins the mother's first smile in hours. Joke one lands softly and does its job. Mainstream historical fact to steady your feet. Among Maya communities, ancient and living midwives often called by local names, you'll hear, as comadronas in Spanish today, held specialized knowledge of birth positions, massage, herbal infusions, and ritual protection. Archaeology adds a chorus. Sweat bath houses, steam baths are documented at Maya sites. Ethnohistoric sources describe postpartum steaming to cleanse, warm, and rebalance the mother after delivery. In the same world that offered blood to the gods, women offered steam to a recovering body, and both were considered acts of cosmic maintenance. The midwife glances toward the hearth, where the 3 stones glow like small planets. She shifts one with a stick, no fuss, just authority, and tosses a pinch of resin that releases a thin ribbon of scent. Not the thick copal you smelled by the cenote, but a quiet cousin. She ties a red thread around the mother's wrist, and another around the loom beam. So the road does not wander, she says, then turns to you, as if you should already know this. You nod like a student caught daydreaming. The labor tightens. The room condenses to breath and rhythm. The midwife steadies the mother's hips with the cloth and teaches her to breathe low, to let the pain move through like rain through milpa rose. When the crest passes, she offers a sip from a gourd, warm water, tinted with fragrant leaves. Nothing fancy, nothing foreign. This is a kitchen miracle, not a palace one. Quirky tidbit for your pocket. In some Maya towns, the midwife keeps an obsidian blade wrapped in cloth for the umbilical cord, a moonblack shard that only she handles. The cord itself may be saved, dried, or buried with intention. Near the hearth, if the child is a girl who will weave. Near the field edge, if a boy who will hoe rows. By a doorway for a child meant to travel. It's a little cosmic joke with serious teeth. Tell destiny where to find you. You can almost hear the daykeeper from the marriage courtyard mutter, approved. A pulse of pain surges, higher. The midwife shifts tactics. She rubs the mother's lower back with a stone warmed by the hearth, little circles, little breaths, then braces her in a squat with both arms, the way you might brace a friend who's learning to stand after a fall. She hums, a tune built out of 2 notes and years of practice. Outside, bees fuss at squash blossoms. A child runs past, chasing a hoop. Life does not get the memo that anything special is happening. That, too, steadies the room. Historians still argue whether the names and attributes of the moon goddess equal visible in the post-classic codices healer weaver. Midwife patron reflect a much older Pan-Maya cult or a cluster of related local goddesses gradually merged under a single title. The debate swirls in conference halls like steam over a bath. Inside this room, though, the question feels academic in the sweetest sense. Call her Ike's Chell, or call her grandmother, who knows? She is here, and how the midwife's hands don't shake, the head crowns. The midwife laughs, softly, not triumphant, more like, there you are. She tells the mother to breathe down, to let the earth help. A final breath, a cry that cuts the heat, and suddenly the room is full of small, wet complaints. The midwife sweeps the baby into the light, wipes the nose with 2 fingers, whispers a day name against a new ear. She doesn't raise the child high to the gods. She brings the gods down to the child with a kiss. She cuts the cord with the obsidian, swift and sure. She rubs the chest with a thumb touch of warm oil. The baby protests, grows pinker, then surrenders to the ridiculous newness of air. The midwife lays the child skin to skin across the mother and tucks a woven cloth around both. The same cloth that an hour ago hauled pain like a tether now becomes a roof. The symmetry would make a scribe smile. A grandmother slips from the doorway. Grandmothers can do that, and begins the quiet work of postpartum, the warm gruel, the soft jokes, the straightening of mats. The midwife steps outside for a moment, then returns with news that is half medicine, half cosmology. The steam bath fire is ready. Later, when the mother has rested and fed the baby, there will be a gentle steaming, stones spitting when water touches them, pores opening, the body coaxed back toward balance. This is not a spa day, it's maintenance, like retuning a drumhead after a long song. You think of the jaguar altar, where blood and cacao mixed, and realize this room runs a mirror ritual in quieter colors. Their bodies fed gods. Here, bodies feed tomorrow. The same civilization that carved humiliation into stone trains, a tenderness so specific you can feel it in your wrists. How to tuck the cloth's corner so it doesn't scratch a cheek. How to cup a heel so the ankle doesn't flop. How to keep a fire hot enough to soothe but not scorch. You understand the term hidden powers, without anyone needing to add thunder. The midwife gives the father his orders. No heavy drinking, no anger, no loud visitors. Bring water, bring wood, sit down, and, she adds, no climbing into that hammock with bad ideas until the moon says so. Joke 2 lands with mercy, but the rule is real. Postpartum abstinence protects a healing body and keeps milk from fright, as elders will put it. Historians still argue which pieces of the postpartum regimen length of sexual abstinence. Food taboos, hot-cold balance are deep pre-Columbian practice, and which were bent by later colonial meddlers. The midwife will happily leave that argument to scholars so long as the father behaves. She turns back to the baby and ties a tiny thread around that new wrist, murmuring a blessing about clear roads, good rains, and a tongue that speaks truth. She presses the child's feet to a folded cloth, leaving faint damp prints, then lays the cloth near the hearth to dry. So the house remembers, she says. The house, frankly, has a better memory than you do. It's been keeping score since the first 3 stones were set. As the room settles, she tucks the obsidian away and leans in your direction with a grin that says she heard every single anxious thought you had today. You with the crocodile dung sunscreen, she teases joke 3. A callback that warms the air. This is the only protection that matters now. She nods at the mother and the small, angry miracle on her chest. Keep the smoke sweet, keep the water clean, keep the tongues gentle. The gods are listening, but so are babies. You step into the brighter courtyard, blinking, ears still full of that first cry. A bee bumps your shoulder, like a tiny priest with a gourd. Somewhere, a conch murmurs. You realize you've just watched the quietest negotiation in the Maya world. Nothing carved in stone, everything written in steam, cloth, and the steady hands of a woman who answers to no altar but the one with 3 warm stones. If the universe is a bargain, midwives are the notaries the gods actually trust. The air feels thick with sage smoke and memory when you step away from the birthroom calm into a shaded patio where scribes argue in low voices. They sit on mats, bark paper codices, spread open like wings, fingers tapping glyphs that glitter faintly with red and black ink. Their tones rise, then fall measured, polite, but stubborn. It's not gossip, it's philosophy. You've stumbled into the oldest of human hobbies, debating whether something is sacred or profane. One scribe, hair bound in a jade clasp, insists that blood drawn from genitals is the holiest gift of all, seed turned sacrifice, body turned bridge. Another shakes his head, arguing that this blurs dangerous lines, that intimacy meant for creating life shouldn't be given to the fire. They gestured to drawings of lords piercing their tongues, queens threading thorns, captives bound on ball courts. Their disagreement is a map of an argument that will never end. Mainstream fact to anchor you: Maya inscriptions and codices confirm that auto-sacrifice piercing tongue, ears, and genitals was a central act of devotion, especially among elites. It symbolized communication with gods, fertility, and continuity of the cosmos. Yet not every Maya community may have practiced each form equally, and accounts vary. Spanish chroniclers, horrified, often exaggerated or misunderstood. That leaves us with puzzle pieces, not a full picture. The scribes press the issue. The gods demand life force, says one. But must it always be through pain? Counters another. They cite examples: a noble's blood versus a farmer's maize, a queen's cord versus a midwife's steam bath. Which is truer, sacrifice the jaguar altar or the birthroom hearth? You find yourself nodding like a student at a seminar, half amused, half uneasy. Joke one slips out in your head. Apparently, academic panels haven't changed in 1,500 years. Still passionate, still inconclusive, still way too long. A young apprentice unrolls a codex illustration showing the maize god dancing, corn silk trailing from his headdress. He bleeds, the boy says, but he also dances. The elders frown. One murmurs, yes, but that blood is not like ours. The debate swells again. Is divine fertility metaphor or command? Are humans meant to copy gods literally, or is the copy itself a dangerous parody? Quirky tidbit: some Maya texts describe flower wars, ritualized battles fought to capture prisoners specifically for sacrifice. Were these wars holy or profane? Scholars today still argue, were they real wars disguised as rituals, or rituals disguised as wars? The Maya scribes in front of you raise the same puzzle: if blood is sacred, does it matter if it flows from devotion, battle, or parody? Is a captive's humiliation as holy as a queen's self-wounding? The conversation pauses when a runner bursts in with news. Lightning struck a tree outside the city. Some scribes nod approvingly, calling it a sign of divine hunger. Others mutter uneasily, was it holy wrath, or simply a storm? They argue about whether the omen means the gods want another cenote sacrifice, or whether it's already enough proof of their presence. You lean against a wall, thinking, historians still argue, applies equally to ancient scholars and modern ones. Joke 2 rattles in your mind. Congratulations, you're live streaming the first interdisciplinary conference. The air thickens with incense as the eldest scribe lifts a carved staff. He reminds the group that not all rituals are equal. Some bleed for gods, some bleed for vanity. A lord may call his act sacred, he says, but if the rain does not come, the people will call it foolish. The others fall silent. The weight of pragmatism cuts through theology. You feel the hush like the quiet after thunder. Your eyes wander to a mural along the wall. It shows villagers feasting, laughter spilling, lovers leaning close. No blood, no altars, just life. A younger scribe gestures at it. If joy feeds the gods, why call it profane? His voice trembles, but his point lands. The elders exchange glances. One finally mutters, "Perhaps we have been too quick to carve sin." Historians still argue whether Maya cosmology divided the sacred and profane at all, in the way Europeans later insisted. Some evidence suggests no clean split corn, grinding, weaving, even sex could all carry sacred charge if tied to calendar and prayer. Others argue for a more formal separation of ritual versus daily life. Tonight, you hear the debate itself, as alive then, as now, unresolved as smoke curling skyward. The apprentices refill cups with thin cacao, slightly bitter. A grandmother wanders through, chuckling that the scribes argue with words, while women argue with weaving meaning. A loom answers faster than a codex. Joke 3 surfaces naturally. You whispered that, even in your world, professors argue longer than anyone wants. The grandmother barks a laugh, so loud it shakes the mats. Even the sternest elder smiles. The debate tapers as the night deepens. Some scribes insist blood is the truest prayer. Others cling to the sanctity of hearth, of laughter, of breath. No one wins. No one ever will. And maybe that's the point. You realize the Maya didn't need answers carved in stone. They needed arguments to keep the cosmos spinning. As you step back into the courtyard, the stars feel closer, pulsing like ink dots on a codex. You breathe the insulating air and think of notes, thorn chords, midwives, masked festivals, all echoes of the same unresolved conversation. What is sacred? What is profane? And who decides? The answer is smoke. The answer is laughter. The answer is rain. And the debate will wait for you tomorrow. The jungle feels quieter now, as though the arguments of the scribes still hang in the air like incense. But your feet carry you away from philosophy and back into ruins of another kind. Walls cracked, murals peeling, plazas half-choked by vines. This is not the glory of kings or the laughter of masked festivals. This is collapse, and it leaves behind fragments where truth and distortion mingle. Tonight, you wander into the twilight of the Maya world, where Spanish eyes watched, judged, and wrote their own stories. The collapse and lingering shadows. You duck beneath a crumbling lintel and step into a plaza, where once proud stele lean drunkenly. Glyphs that once shouted lineage and sacrifice now look like ghost scratches. The villagers you find here are different, fewer in number, wary, their rituals smaller, folded into daily chores. The grand cenote sacrifices have dwindled to a trickle of offerings, a gourd of honey, a twist of copal. The thunder of drums has softened into the scratch of grinding stones. Collapse doesn't mean silence. It means shrinking volume. Mainstream historical fact. By the end of the 9th century, many southern lowland Maya cities Tikal, Copan, Palenque saw drastic declines. Populations thinned, monumental buildings slowed, dynasties sputtered out. Scholars still debate causes: climate change, warfare, overuse of land, shifting trade. Yet Maya culture didn't vanish. People carried their languages, rituals, and gods forward, adapting them to new rhythms. Later, when the Spanish arrived, they layered their own narratives over what was left. Sometimes misunderstanding, sometimes deliberately distorting. A friar's voice drifts into the plaza, not in person, but in memory. You can almost hear him muttering about devil dances and obscene rites. His quill scratches condemnation into parchment. Yet you've walked these plazas. You've smelled the copal, watched the smoke curl, felt the heartbeat in the drums. The friar's words don't match the lived reality. He saw excess where villagers saw duty. He wrote horror where the people wrote balance. Quirky tidbit: One Spanish account claimed Maya villagers worshipped idols shaped like grotesque human figures with exaggerated parts, parading them during festivals. Some scholars argue these were fertility effigies, others that they were satirical masks, like the gourds you saw in the Festival of Reversal. Historians still argue whether the friars misunderstood parody as pornography, or whether they intentionally exaggerated to justify conquest. Either way, the word spread, and Europe believed. You walk past a half-buried mural. Faint colors remain. A woman piercing her tongue, a serpent curling out of the smoke, a mazed god dancing. The friars painted over some of these, plastering saints on top. Now the plaster peels, and both faces stare out. Christ and serpent, Mary and maze, a path of devotion. The villagers prayed to both, whispering one set of names while bowing to another. Sacred and profane, blurred forever. Children run by chasing a hoop, their laughter too bright for ruins. They still bear cranial shapes like maize cobs, still wear hooples embroidered with ancestral patterns. Collapse is not disappearance, it is mutation. You think of the scribe who shrugged about cousin marriages, the grandmother who told you babies must be planted where they live. Those voices still hum beneath the friar's condemnations. A drizzle begins, soft as fingers on a drum. Villagers lift their faces to it, whispering Chalk's name under their breath even as they cross themselves. Two languages, two cosmologies, one thirst. You feel the drizzle, cool your skin, and for a moment, you understand. The gods never left. They only changed masks. Historians still argue about how much of Maya sexuality the Spaniards misunderstood, versus how much truly faded. Did the thorned cord ordeal vanish entirely, or did it become symbolic weaving in ritual cloths? Did masked festivals of reversal stop, or did they survive disguised as saints' feast parades? The evidence is thin, the arguments fierce, but tonight you see what remains. Laughter, maze, smoke, rain, always rain. You almost whisper a joke to cut the heaviness collapse. Sure, but at least no one has to keep the HR schedule straight anymore, and the thought actually makes you laugh out loud. A boy stops, grins at you, then runs on. The joke lands, small but real, a reminder that humor, too, survives collapse. The drizzle thickens into rain. The plaza stones darken, shining. You tilt your head back, and for a moment you think of the jade-draped girl sinking into black cenote water, the noblewoman bleeding smoke, the midwife tying red thread, the scribe arguing sacred versus profane. They are all still here, in fragments, in shadows. Collapse doesn't erase, it refracts. The rain falls, and the gods are still listening. Morning light filters through lattice stone, warm and gold, and the courtyard feels subdued after the intoxicated whirl of last night. The villagers stir slowly, faces puffy from honey drink, hammocks swaying like lazy metronomes. But beneath the softness lies a tension that cuts sharper than obsidian. Today, your steps take you to a wall where laws are written not in ink, but in pain, adultery punishments carved in stone. You pass through a narrow street, walls high and painted with faded reds, until you reach a plaza where upright stelae stand like solemn sentinels. Their surfaces are covered in glyphs and scenes, some nearly worn smooth, others as crisp as if chiseled yesterday. One depicts two figures bound together, arms twisted, eyes downcast. Another shows a lord holding a torch beside a kneeling couple. You realize these are not abstract tales, they're warnings. Public as any billboard. Mainstream historical fact here. Maya legal codes, though fragmentary, show that adultery was considered a serious breach, particularly for women and nobles. Punishments could range from public shaming to the loss of property, even death in severe cases. Spanish chroniclers noted that stoning or humiliation rituals were practiced, though the accuracy of those accounts remains debated. What's certain is that fidelity was not just a private matter, but a public currency. Betrayal could shake households, alliances, and cosmic harmony. You hear whispers near the stele. A man gestures with his chin at a carving of a bound couple, then lowers his voice. Better the lash than drought. The phrase curls around your ears. In a society where every union was meant to serve balance, infidelity wasn't only a personal slight, it was believed to risk divine displeasure, even famine. You feel a chill as you recall the Senate's dark mirror. The gods didn't miss details. A priest steps forward with a long staff, its head carved into a serpent. He recounts the story of a noblewoman who betrayed her husband with a rival warrior. According to him, the punishment was swift. Her family stripped of wealth, her name carved into a stela for all to see. He taps the glyphs, the sound hollow against stone. You realize this is less sermon than deterrent. Quirky tidbit: in some accounts, caught adulterers were forced to parade through the streets with their clothes turned inside out, an early walk of shame, if you will. Imagine your laundry mishap being ritualized as a cosmic warning. You almost chuckle first joke, but then you notice how grim the villagers' faces are. For them, embarrassment wasn't just social, it was metaphysical. If one person's indiscretion could anger the gods, everyone had reason to frown. The priest shifts, pointing to a carving where a man is depicted with a burden on his back. He explains that sometimes, instead of execution, punishment meant labor hauling wood, grinding maize, weaving until debts of shame were balanced. Your modern self wants to call this community service, but with much higher stakes. Second joke sneaks out in your head. Ancient Maya, probation office apply here. Obsidian ankle monitors, optional. But your humor falters when you glance at a nearby stela showing flames curling around a bound figure. The priest lowers his voice, saying such measures were rare, but not unheard of. A final severing of cosmic imbalance through fire. Historians still argue whether these depictions represent literal executions or symbolic narratives, morality tales carved into public stone. Either way, the imagery was meant to burn memory into anyone tempted by betrayal. The plaza grows quiet as an elder woman steps forward, her shawl pulled close. She tells a different story of a man forgiven after confession to a priest and offerings at the temple. She insists mercy was possible, that not all punishments ended in ruin. You catch murmurs in the crowd. Some agree, others shake their heads. Here's your open debate. Historians still argue whether Maya justice leaned more toward rigid punishment or flexible restitution. With fragmentary records, it's hard to know. But clearly, even within the community, the tension between retribution and mercy flickered like torchlight. The stele shimmer faintly in the morning sun, their carvings catching golden light. You notice details: the folds of a hoopil, the grim line of a prisoner's mouth, the stoic stance of judges with feathered staffs. It dawns on you that these stones aren't only warnings, they're theater, permanent as the sky. Each passerby rehearses their own fidelity simply by looking. Children run by, playing with a ball, and one trips near the carvings. His mother snaps sharply, "Careful." He laughs, unaware, but her eyes dart nervously to the glyphs, as though the gods are already watching. You realize how much daily life is braided with surveillance, not by guards, but by belief itself. You remember the tangled polygamy households, the marriages by omen, the thorned cords of devotion. Desire was never free-floating here. It was tethered to community, law, and cosmos. Adultery, then, wasn't merely breaking trust. It was slicing through the very knot of the universe. A breeze passes, cool and sharp, rustling the feathers on the priest's staff. He dismisses the gathering, and villagers shuffle away, muttering prayers. The stele remain, implacable, their shadows stretching long across the plaza. You linger, feeling the carvings watching you as much as you watch them. You mutter your third joke under your breath. Note to self: delete. Tinder before time traveling to the Maya world, but it lands heavy in your chest. Because beneath the humor is a truth you can't laugh away. Here, the line between intimacy and survival was razor thin, carved in stone for everyone to see. The torches thin out as the procession dissolves into side paths, and you follow a quieter stream of villagers into a courtyard where a clay griddle hisses and the smell of fresh tortillas floats like a soft blanket. The drums are distant now, replaced by the steady rhythm of a metate stone as a girl grinds maize. You scrape a little cinnamon chill from your shoulders and step beneath a thatched eave. Here, horror loosens its grip, replaced by something more domestic and, no less binding. Tonight, pivots from blood to bargains, marriage arranged by omens. An elder daykeeper sits cross-legged near the hearth, a worn bundle of bark paper almanacs resting in his lap, fingers stained with incense smoke. He doesn't look at the couple, he looks at the sky, then back at a calendar wheel scratched into a wooden board. He whispers day names, soft syllables that sound like rain on leaves, and nods when he reaches one that suits the union. The 260-day count, the sacred Dazokan, decides more than holidays. It decides lives. Your pulse steadies with the warmth of the fire as you watch him mark the auspicious day when these two will share a roof, a table, and the dizzying responsibility of keeping the cosmos in balance by keeping each other fed. That's the mainstream fact for your mental backpack. Among Maya communities, marriages were commonly arranged by families and sealed on lucky dates chosen by diviners using the parents negotiated through a matchmaker, think expert aunt, but with better astrology, and exchanged bride wealth gifts like cotton mantles, cacao beans, salt obsidian blades, and the occasional very important turkey. Meanwhile, residence was often patriarchal. The bride moved to the groom's household, folding her life into his family's hearth. A woman with silver hair slides 3 stones closer together beneath the griddle, resetting the household fire so the newcomers will inherit a steady flame. You remember the sacred smoke from the thorned cord ordeal, and realize the same logic breathes here too. Fire is breath, breath is life, and life is the quiet engine of cosmic duty. In Maya thought, the 3 hearthstones echo 3 stars. Geometry tucked into a kitchen corner. The daykeeper nods at the new arrangement as if the heavens just approved the room decor. The matchmaker steps in, bracelets chiming, voice velvet but firm, reviewing what's owed and what's promised. The groom's father clears his throat and presents folded mantles, the weave tight as river reeds. The bride's mother sets out a basket of cacao beans, their bitter fragrance rising like a serious kind of sweetness. You can't help a small smile. It's the ancient world's wedding registry. 100 beans, 2 blankets, 1 future without drought. Please. And yes, they expect you to bring a gift. If you show up with only good vibes, the daykeeper might schedule you on a very unlucky Tuesday. Quirky tidbit time. In some communities, the couple received symbolic tools, spindle and loom implements for the bride, a cutting blade, or digging stick for the groom, public props for private vows. It's not tuxes and bouquets. It's you weave, I till, and together we stitch the dais. The items are less about gender stereotypes than about cosmic choreography. Cloth and corn, thread and soil, to crafts that keep the calendar well oiled. A screech owl calls from the dark, and a hush moves through the yard. An ant mutters that the omen is fussy but manageable. The daykeeper relights a twist of copal and lets the smoke coil into the gloom. He flicks ash with a practiced gesture that says, in polite priestly language, "Not tonight, bird." Historians still argue whether such night omens could actually postpone a ceremony or simply require extra propitiation. But everyone here treats the moment seriously, like pausing a playlist to let a buffering icon finish thinking. The groom arrives lead by his uncles, not swaggering so much as trying not to trip over the woven mat. He's painted lightly with chalk, a calm face on a nervous spine. The bride enters from behind a reed screen, hair braided and threaded with soft cotton. No kissing, no dramatic flourishes, just the families acknowledging that private affection must learn to speak in public ritual. Your modern brain wants a rom-com, meet cute. The Maya version is more spreadsheet than screenplay. To them, love is a garden you weed for decades, not fireworks that vanish by dawn. And yes, you still owe the turkey. The negotiations drift. The rain still beads on your shoulders when you step into a village that feels quieter than the grand plazas, gentler than the court. Smoke rises from hearths, tortillas slap softly on comelas, and chickens scatter at your feet. It looks ordinary. You notice the threads. Woven cloth hangs from every doorway, embroidered with glyph-like patterns. Children wear hooples, bright with ancient motifs. An elder sits under a ceiba, fingers worrying a string of red beads. You realize you're no longer wandering ruins. You're in today's Maya towns, where faint echoes of those horrific, mesmerizing practices still survive. A woman grinding maize hums, and you recognize her melody. It's the same tune you heard a midwife sing while bracing a laboring mother, except here, it's a lullaby for her baby strapped to her back. Continuity disguised as comfort. The thorned chords are gone, but the idea that sound itself opens doors for gods. Still there, mainstream fact to steady the moment. Millions of Maya descendants live today across Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, Honduras, and El Salvador. They speak dozens of Maya languages, 10 maize fields, and still consult daykeepers for auspicious dates. While human sacrifice is long gone, ritual weaving, calendrical divination, and offerings of candles, copal and food remain vibrant. Many Catholic festivals overlay older Maya traditions. Saints paraded where gods once danced. Candles lit where blood once smoked. A young man tells you his sister married last year on a day the AJQIJ, the daykeeper, chose. He laughs at the idea of just picking a weekend. You wouldn't plant maize on a bad day, he says. Why risk a marriage? You grin first, joke. So basically your wedding planner is also your astrologer. He nods seriously, then grins back. You pass a church painted white, its doorway draped in pine boughs. Inside, candles flicker, and women kneel, murmuring prayers, some to Christ, some to Ixchel, some to both, in the same breath. Offerings of chocolate, maize, and flowers sit beneath a statue of the Virgin. It's not contradiction, it's survival. Colonial friars tried to scrape the gods away. Villagers wove them into saints instead. Quirky tidbit, in some highland towns. During Carnival or Holy Week, dancers still wear jaguar masks and carry effigies with exaggerated features, half parody, half reverence. Outsiders see colorful folk festivals. Insiders recognize old shadows. You remember the masked gourds from the Festival of Reversal, and you realize the laughter survived. The friars condemned it, but the people folded it into firestas. And elder invites you to sit. She offers thick atole, steaming, fragrant with cinnamon. Between sips, she tells you stories. How her grandmother swore that Venus still decides when it's safe to travel. How her grandfather poured out a few drops of liquor before every rain. Not sacrifice, she says with a wink. Just courtesy. Joke 2 forms naturally. So the gods still want a tip jar. She chuckles, then adds, they always have. You walk to the edge of town where a modern well stands beside an ancient cenote. Children throw pebbles, giggling at the plunks. Their parents don't shush them, but later one quietly leaves candles at the rim. No one speaks of throwing lives anymore, but the water still feels like a mouth. Historians still argue whether current rituals, flowers, candles, prayers at springs are Catholicized or deeply Maya. But sitting here, watching ripples under candlelight, you sense the continuity. The form changes. The hunger remains. A grandmother shows you a hoop hill embroidered with spirals and maze glyphs. It's the old story, she says. But now we wear it, not cut it. Her words carry both relief and weight. You touch the cloth and remember. Thorned cords, obsidian blades, blood smoke curling skyward. Here, the same symbols bloom in thread, not skin. Survival by substitution. At nightfall, villagers gather under the ceiba. Someone lights copal. Children chase fireflies. A daykeeper chants the calendar, his cadence slow, vowels long. He blesses the maize field, the hearths, the young couples. You realize you've been hearing this cadence all along at the cenote, at the altar, at the birthroom. The names of days outlast the empires that carved them. Historians still argue how much continuity is real and how much is reinvention. Does it matter? You sit in the smoke, hear laughter, taste cinnamon atole, and feel the same thread running, backward 1,000 years. It hums in maize grinding, in wedding knots, in whispered prayers to Venus. Horror has faded, yes, but echoes linger, soft as a lullaby, sharp as obsidian under dust. You offer your third nervous joke before leaving. So the gods traded blood for chocolate foam. The elder beside you nods with a smile that says, finally, you understand. The smoke drifts, the ceiba looms, and the night softens. You close your eyes, hearing echoes that belong to both past and present, carried like seeds in every laugh, every prayer, every thread.